item this morning. I want to welcome our guest. Our guest is Mr. Justman. Are you public now, Mr. Justman?
Pardon?
Are you public now?
Yeah, I am public.
You are the public, are you?
Well, I am a public, I'm a commissioner and other things.
Yeah, okay, good. Glad to have you here this morning. But our first order of the day is going to be to hear from our division engineer, Alan Martellero. And how much more is it going to keep on snowing?
Well, I think the long-term forecast is for above average precip. So we'll hope that sticks.
Keep it coming. Okay.
It's easier to administer water when you have water to administer.
In some areas, and in some areas where there's none, it's easier. So yeah. We unfortunately had some of that last year. Good morning. I was asked to talk about some of the challenges of 2018, and I don't have much time, so it's not going to be very deep, but we'll see what we can do. We started the year out with some concerns about what we call the April hold. It's a term I think Max Schmidt from Orchard Mesa coined the term. I'm not sure, but
I think that predates Max. Even.
It does.
Yeah.
The word April hold does.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I know he's constantly harping on it. It's his big issue of today because it's when the flows drop really low in the 15-mile reach, he has a lot more work to do to try and keep the GBIC satisfied. But the issue was really highlighted in 2013. Which was the year that followed, of course, the drought year of 2012, and so our base flows were extremely low that next spring. And the idea or the issue is that the Fish and Wildlife Service would like to see no less than 500 CFS in the 15-mile reach at any time. And flows that start to dropping below that become a problem, as I said earlier, for Orchard Mesa and the Grand Valley Irrigation Company. So irrigation operations get more difficult as the flows get really low. In 2013, I think we got as low as 55 CFS. And in addition to those low base flows and the very beginnings of the irrigation operations, Denver also chose to implement its Shoshone call reduction agreement. And since then, we figured out that the agreement shouldn't have been implemented at that time, but it caused flows to get really low. So ever since then, we've committed to making sure that doesn't happen. So part of our early meetings in the late winter include discussing whether we're going to try and augment the flows in that reach. And in this particular year, the challenge was that we were concerned with whether we were going to fill Green Mountain. And if we released water from Green Mountain, which is what we chose to do ultimately, we released it from the surplus from the previous year's HUP pool. Because that pool still existed, we hadn't, or the Bureau hadn't declared start to fill at Green Mountain yet. So we made the release. It was 2,400 acre feet. You can see the blue line was the augmented flow, the actual flow. So the release was successful. We kept, the green line would have, during that period where there's a blue line is the flow that would have existed without the release, and the flows would have dropped below 500. And you can see we were fairly successful in preventing the April hold. Ultimately, Green Mountain didn't physically fill and didn't actually paper fill, but it was close enough that it didn't impact the West Slope water users. The HUP filled last year, and so did the contract pool. So this operation may, the water that we released for this April hold may have just been something the Bureau released as discretionary power releases later. So it didn't turn out to be a problem, but that was the challenge for that issue. You know, I might run out of time, so I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to skip some of these slides. This is the actual snowpack.
We'll give you. We can give you more time.
What's that?
We can give you more time. We aren't behind schedule yet. So yeah.
You haven't been on schedule yet?
No, we haven't. We're not behind schedule yet. So
Both of those things are true.
We
haven't been behind.
So why start now?
Take the time you need, Alan.
All right, thank you. This is a snowpack last year, and issues that this presented, obviously, are that we went into the winter was bumping along really in poor shape. The red lines represent 2002 and the lowest year on the lowest, not year, but the lowest record. And the heavy blue line is last year. And you could see that we kind of got saved by storms in late March and April. But before the April storms, the Bureau declared start of fill, or not start of fill, they had to declare their fill plan pursuant to the Green Mountain fill protocol. And then we, Division of Water Resources, decide whether we think it's an adequate plan or not. We accepted their plan. Their plan included some release for power, which I talked about, with the April hole there. There may have been just a little more power release without the release for the April hole, but the power releases occurred in May. But at any rate, the issue was that it looked like we were almost going to be saved from the extreme lack of precipitation earlier in the winter with some spring storms. Unfortunately, in May, we just didn't get any precipitation, and that trend continued throughout the summer. We went into the summer with we're in spring. The June forecasts for Cameo were 66% of normal, and .0 77% of normal. Ultimately, the runoff was in the 48 and 58% of normal ranges because of the lack of summer precip. At any rate, the Bureau did not, unfortunately, modify the fill plan until June 1st. And had they modified it a little sooner, a little less power water would have been reached, and we might have reached a physical fill at Green Mountain. But we ended up not reaching a physical fill. They modified the fill plan on June 1st to eliminate all power releases, and they just went to minimum release. And like I said, the physical maximum storage in Green Mountain was 148, and the Green Mountain holds 153 and change. But at any rate, on paper, it was it stored 151 and a half ish, and so we were shy of a paper fill, but they had released 4,100 acre feet for power, and so the cities ultimately didn't owe any replacement water for the difference. So at any rate, but as I said, the HEP pool filled and the contract pool filled. So what wasn't full in Green Mountain was some storage that is really considered not firm yield anyway. So we ended up okay in that regard. The next slide is just a depiction of how bad last year was compared to other years. This is 84 years of record, a Cameo of actual gauge flow. The red line represents is a projection or the level that the last year's flows were, and it was actually the 5th worst year on record. 2002 being the worst year, and 77 the 2nd worst year. But at any rate, just as a comparison, the .0 gauge was in a little better shape. It was the 16th worst year on record. So from that, we had better snowpack in the upper basin than the lower basin. This was probably the biggest challenge we had last year dealing with the HEP pool. The roll curve comes from the Orchard Mesa check case, and those two blue lines represent the high and the low range of a dry year drawdown of the HEP pool. The red line represents what happened last year. And the problem is that the normal drawdown doesn't occur until into July, and we had a call on the river on June 22nd. And so we started making releases, but we didn't start making releases from the HUP until June 30th. And so at any rate, we were making releases for the Shoshone call at that point, and the releases were for replacement of HUP beneficiaries. sometime in July. I didn't write down the date. I should know it off the top of my head, but I don't have it. We had a call from Cameo, and so we started making releases for both beneficiaries above and below .0 at that point. So, you could see the red line just tracked along the bottom edge of the drawdown band, and not a good situation. Normally, that drawdown band in most years is used to determine when we declare a surplus in the HUP. So if we are above the darker blue line, we generally declare a surplus and start using the water for the endangered fish. But obviously, in this particular year, we didn't declare a surplus at any point during the year. So the challenge became worse in early August once we had replaced all HUP beneficiaries that were upstream of Cameo and started making direct releases to the irrigators in the Grand Valley, and started drawing down the HUP pool. The HUP stands for Historic Users of Green Mountain. Once we started drawing down below that lighter blue line due to direct deliveries to those users, we started becoming concerned. And we had expressed our concern in a number of the HUP meetings that have weekly, sometimes twice weekly, but we didn't really, a plan didn't gel to deal with it until August 31st. And at that time, what we did was we took the amount of water we needed for the users above Shoshone and the water we needed to preserve for the winter and subtracted it from what was left in the pool. And then we told the irrigators in Grand Valley that instead of making replacement releases for the beneficiaries above them, we were just going to tell them they could use the pool how they wanted to, what was left in the pool. And we prorated it between the two irrigation canals, and deemed a certain amount for one canal and a certain amount for the other canal, to encourage them to decide how they wanted to either preserve what was left or use it all when they felt they could make the best use of it. And what ended up happening, everybody decided that was a decent plan, and I believe Victor from the Bureau and my former assistant Kyle should be, recognized for their efforts in making this thing come off, because otherwise we probably would have drained that pool about September 8th, and there would have been some angst amongst those irrigation groups down in the Grand Valley. So blaming each other for the problems, I think. But at any rate, the Grand Valley Irrigation Company used their portion of the pool by September 17th, and the Water Users Association, which is the Highline Canal, used their portion up on September 30th. So we ended up getting through the problem. Every year seems like we have something different to do with Green Mountain, and that was certainly a unique situation last year. You might notice a little bump in the red line after September 26th. It's actually September 28th. I don't know if you could see that. That's 500 acre-feet of water that was added to the pool after the fact when we knew we had over-released. And the Bureau, we needed 500 acre-feet for the winter, so the Bureau went in and we over-released by 50 acre-feet also. Added 550 acre-feet to the pool, took it out of what was hoped to be discretionary power release in the winter, and it turned out to be that, so it worked out just fine. But anyway, that's what that little bump is. We wouldn't have made it even that far had we not had some of these things happen, and I don't know if I need to go through them all. But there, those two pools that were used, the 4,000 and the 1,000 from Ute Water and from Grand County, that were used to make direct deliveries to the irrigators, really did help out a great deal. And I don't know that we have a meeting with the irrigators without them thanking everyone that helped them out. And those numbers in the bottom group for the endangered fish flows also help the River District staff put some time in and lobbied some of the contractors in Root Eye for some water to help the cause, and ExxonMobil put up their 3,000 acre feet for what's called the 4 and 5 year pool. It's a pool that's firm out of Root Eye 4 out of 5 years, and in this, obviously, that particular year, Root Eye didn't build and the water wasn't available, so Mobile put up some water for that. Another thing that happened last year was the drawdown of Wolford for operational reasons. That delayed us making releases from all these fish pools and was a huge help last year. The timing happened to be good. I guess we spend way more time on local issues than we do on the main stem, and we like to talk about the main stem because it seems more interesting, but our local streams require most of our resources in our division. So, but last year, how much more time do I have, Andy?
Well, I would defer to
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
How much more do you have, do you need?
I could skip a couple slides if you'd like.
Well, this is interesting stuff for this group, I think.
Yeah, I only have 3 more slides.
Take it, yeah, no, this is interesting stuff for this group. We're geeks.
Anyway.
Speak for yourself.
I'm
a misfit.
Okay.
We have a lot of streams that go on call every year, and most of those streams go on call sometime between mid-June and mid-July. Well, those sort of streams last year did not go off call. They were on call the entire irrigation season, and some of them only had 1 or 2 water rights that actually were in priority the entire year. So it was one of those dire years. And that's to be expected, but some of the streams that don't go on call every year is where our problems come in, because people get used to having water and things don't always work the way, their head gates may not work, their measuring devices may not work, whatever, their ponds may not be capable of releasing water. And so on those kind of streams, we often have og plans that don't work the way they're envisioned, and you can see those little bullets below the item on inoperable og plans, some of the issues that we run into in years like 2018. But 2018 also highlighted something that wasn't normal, and that's that second bullet under inoperable og plans, the historic use credits that are in some of these og plans were not available because the source water right, the water right that was dried up to create the credits, was either was out of priority, or there just physically wasn't enough water at the ditch to provide for these HCU credits. So that was something that hopefully rarely happens. But and most of our problems with og plans is the actual depletion replacement is mistimed, and it's an easy thing to solve when you have a reservoir. A little tougher when you have draft credits. So those were some of our local issues. I thought I would highlight maybe the worst case of local issue that we had last year, and that was on the Crystal River. Historically, the bottom handful of ditches right around the town of Carbondale prior to 1981 placed a call on the river. I don't know that they've placed a call since '81, and it has a lot to do with the urbanization of that ground. It's mostly in the town of Carbondale. It's either golf course or residential area, and I guess there's still a little bit of irrigation down by the Colorado Rocky Mountain School, but there's very little ag irrigation under these ditches, and so they haven't placed a call for a long time. But what happened, because they didn't place a call, the Ella Ditch ultimately ended up placing a call last year, and that has never happened on the Crystal River. And that call caused a problem with the town of Carbondale, among many other people. But the town has changed some of those water rights that were urbanized, that I mentioned earlier, and changed them up to their Nettle Creek diversion, but they couldn't use those credits or the change if there was an intervening call, and that's what the Ella Ditch was, an intervening call. So what the Nettle Creek pipeline comes off of Mount Soapers down to the town of Carbondale, and there's taps all the way down from the old ranchers that allowed easements to their property, and that was their only source of water. plus the pipeline is very important for fire safety. So we didn't want to just flat shut it off. And so we sat down with the town of Carbondale. They agreed to no outside irrigation until we solve the problem and keep the pipeline full for fire safety and allow these couple of taps to go ahead and continue to divert. And ultimately, originally the town went to the Ella ditch and tried to buy some water, but the problem was there was also an in-stream flow call on, and Nettle Creek was upstream of the Ella ditch, so they ended up going to the East Mesa ditch and buying some water and filing for an emergency substitute water supply plan, and they also used their root eye water to provide the return flows that historically occurred from the East Mesa ditch. So we ended up working it all out with the town. There was a number of other entities that had problems above the Ella ditch. A couple of old water rights, not old, but pre-1972 Senate Bill 35 that had water rights that weren't really good firm water rights, but had never been curtailed. Somehow were under the radar over the years, and we ran across those. And it also included the town of Marble. We had a tabulation error with Marble's water rights and didn't really recognize that they were out of priority in 2002 and 2012, but figured it out last year, and the town is now working on some storage. And together with that, they're willing to consider, we've also talked to West Divide about this, trying to come up with a regional solution to these subdivisions that also have problems. And maybe we can get one reservoir to solve, somebody can build two storage to solve the problems for all these groups that are above.
A reservoir would help up there, wouldn't it?
The reservoir would certainly help on the Crystal River. There's no question about it. I don't know if you're familiar with our Area A, Area B line, but Crystal River is in Area B, and so a simple West Divide contract doesn't solve the problem. It only solves the problem for the river call and not for the local call. So some storage on the Crystal River would be very helpful.
We thought so.
If you guys have some way to manage that, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
We're hoping for a more regional solution than a bunch of little frog ponds.
Just mention the name Placida to everybody you talk to up there. Yeah. You'll get a warm
It's
reception.
county here.
Yeah, you know, the snow is so deep, Alan, it took me a while to get.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, so that's all I had. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Could you go back a slide? So, could you talk a little bit about the in-stream flow call?
Yes, the in-stream flow call has been relatively common for the Crystal River for the last 10 years, I would say.
But it's a fairly junior, right?
It is. It's
Yeah.
19, well, of the in-stream flows, it's among its most senior.
True,
It's 1976, yes.
But still compared to most of the irrigation rights.
Oh, no, very junior, yes. But the change case that Carbondale has is using these some of the water rights are, I think 1883 is the most senior one. But it was changed after the in-stream flow call was decreed. So they have to, they can't operate that change in the face of the in-stream flow call.
Thank you.
Peter, you had a question?
Actually, before we, one more, the town also has wells on the Roaring Fork and the Crystal River. And those wells were able to operate. The town chose not to operate their Crystal River wells because they were to influence the flow in the Crystal, and the Crystal is, you know, in spite of everything else, an amenity for the town. They want to see water in the river, and so they operated their Roaring Fork wells. But it was difficult for them to provide enough water for everyone to irrigate whenever they wanted their lawns. So they actually had water restrictions, self-imposed, not by us, for the rest of the town, not just for the people that were supplied by the Nettle Creek infrastructure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, Alan. First was, how much, do you know how much water was used from the 52,000 acre foot replacement pool?
I don't have the number, no, but it wasn't very much.
Wasn't very
Generally, what happens in years like this is the physical supply isn't up there for them to have to replace. You know, the fall might be a few more days longer than it would in a wet year, know, and I should know that number, I'm sorry, Peter, but it's never been that much. I mean, the most they've ever used is not a very big number.
Do you know what that maximum number is?
I don't.
Well, this is,
Yeah,
we're diving
The other question I had was the non-functioning augmentation plans, because the base water right that is used for the historic consumptive use credits was out of priority or no physical supply available to it. Does that occurrence cause your office to reevaluate the priority upon which reliable water, a water right can be deemed reliable for use in an augmentation plan?
For that particular drainage, yes. Yeah.
And my final question,
And whether we go back to those AUG plans, we're looking at, we actually have to curtail somewhat. I mean, we try to work with them somewhat, but if their AUG plan's not working and they're watering a ball field, we're gonna tell them they need to shut off and just use water in their home until we can work something out. I mean, we don't just usually flat go out and totally shut somebody off, if we can help it, but depends if they're gonna work with us or not.
can you just briefly describe the changes in your office and who your new assistant is?
James Heath has replaced Kyle Whitaker as the assistant, my lead assistant division engineer, and James is working on a trial in Rio Grande. That's where the area he's from. He's from our Alamosa office, but it's not a trial related to the rules case, which you might be familiar with, but it's another trial. That's been a pretty big deal for them for some time. Anyway, he's working on his expert report. It was due today, so he couldn't come in this morning and meet you all, but I will try and get him down here someday at one of your quarterly meetings. But James is, he's a modeler, so he's a detail person. An engineer, yeah.
Engineered?
So he replaces Kyle Whitaker. He's really, really super smart. And also we have a guy by the name of Caleb Floyd that came from our Denver office. Really sharp and energetic guy. He's leading our AUG plan team and the team that works on administration of AUG plans and municipal water rights. So we have two really good engineers that have come to our office in the last little bit. So good.
Jim, you had a question?
Alan, after all the math and operations into last fall, is there water left for this coming April's?
There's not.
Oh, no?
There's not. The water's been fully used. The 500 acre feet we pretty much release throughout the winter.
So,
That was left.
yeah, we'll be, when April 1st comes, sometime between there and May 15th, we'll be on the fill whenever reclamation declares start to
Yeah.
fill.
And base flows are pretty low again, so this is a little bit of a concern. The water doesn't have to come from Green Mountain for that problem.
Come from the river, right?
What's that?
It can come from the river, hopefully.
Well, yeah, we hope.
Yeah.
But root eyes, when drawn down quite a bit too, there's not a lot there. We use root eye for a lot of odd things.
Alden?
Sir, you mentioned in one of your slides that on the tributary, the smaller tributary streams, there was some smaller ponds that were identified that they could not deliver their water to provide the augmentation that they were intended to do. Is there any plans in the future for the division, maybe in your division or anywhere in the state, to recognize that was actually identified flawed on these smaller tributaries to go in and do some remediation work?
Well, we've issued orders to all of them.
Okay.
To either it's because their outlet didn't operate or because there was something in between them and the stream that kept the water from getting there. I had shown, I don't know, Treasure Mountain Reservoir, I don't know why I picked on them, that was probably unfair. But that reservoir releases water and the outlet works just fine, but it ends up in another pond that we can't get water out of. We have to surcharge that pond in order to get the water out, so that's the problem there.
Okay. Any other questions for Alan? Well, thank you very much. Mark, do you have a question? Or?
Yeah, one quick one. On these inoperable ponds and all, what are your orders as to how quickly they have to be fixed?
We need them fixed before the situation season, or before we get into midsummer, yeah.
Do they take that seriously?
Yes. With frog ponds, I put in a plug for agri drains all the time. They're the easiest thing for us to manage.
Right.
Because you pull a board and you're done. If you have a low-level outlet, you have to constantly monitor that the outlet is bypassing the inflow, and it's a little bit tougher. So our preference for these little bitty ponds is that we have agri drains.
And what do you define as an agri drain? Something that head gate, or you mean, or
Well,
something, pull the board on a
Yes,
head gate structure?
it has a standpipe in it for an outlet.
Okay,
And, the water comes in the bottom of the standpipe and then goes up over the top of all these boards that are stacked up in it.
uh-huh,
And you just start pulling those boards.
Huh.
And it lowers the level of the reservoir, maintains the level of that level of the reservoir. What's that?
Those aggregate, yeah, they work real well.
Yeah, it's a really positive way to administer something.
Huh.
Whereas an outlet, you could set the opening, but if the inflow drops or increases, you're not maintaining the reservoir level you want. You have to- And, with big reservoirs, obviously, that you have an operator that's there every day. But these little small ones, if we see them once a week, we're really lucky.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your office's work that you do, and you work very well with the district staff here, so thank you. I guess our next item on external affairs, be Chris and Zane to the two-party show here.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question, when would you like to cover the, it's on the agenda and I missed it, the recap from the INO committee meeting last evening? Kathy's, or,
Kathy's not gonna be here, but so we can cover that after your report.
Karn.
After Karn was, yeah. You said Kathy said that?
No,
Karn,
no.
Had to go to.
Karn was the one, yeah.
Yeah. She said she would have to leave early today. I didn't realize that meant early completely before the meeting. So,
I think she decided to,
Yeah.
get going this morning, so.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. You have our end of the year and December 30th dated memo on the rambling on about the changing faces and places and new people in new positions down at the Capitol. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to provide that, answer any of those. I thought I'd give you just a very quick overview and an update and then turn it over to Zane. I do want to start, however, with, as we do every year, a request for bi-weekly meetings of the board, telephonic meetings, to provide us with regular updates and to adopt positions. As in the past, we'll try to get bills to you electronically, so you have a chance to review those at least a couple days prior to the meetings. Historically, you have chosen Thursdays at noon. If that still works, I would recommend that as at least a starting point for discussion. I also would note that this meeting, set by statute, this regular quarterly meeting, is earlier than usual. So instead of going out 2 weeks, we actually would go out 3 weeks to the first meeting in the first week of February.
Okay, you wanna do
First
one
week of
next week?
February is
Yeah.
traditional, but it's 3 weeks away. Otherwise, we're conflicting with, we're right in the middle of the Water Congress
Yeah.
meeting. So if that works, February 7th at noon would be your first call, and then bi-weekly follow-up.
Okay, there's no need for anything next week, you don't think there's nothing gonna come up at that point?
There will be, but we will muddle along as we do in the intervening weeks every year. And we have, because of that, Zane has a last-minute handout, an additional bill that was just introduced yesterday. We'll try to bring you up to date on and we'll talk briefly about some of the other bills that we're working on and that are anticipated and take direction from you all as opposed to a formal position again, wanting to give you the chance to review a bill before we ask for a formal position.
It would work.
I move we have bi-weekly meetings beginning February 7th at noon on Thursdays at noon, bi-weekly, for purposes of legislative updates and such other business as staff may feel needs to be on the agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly, to bring you up to date on a number of recent developments. After the election in November, our lobbyist of many years, Danny Williams, has retired. So we have replaced Danny Williams, and not surprisingly, with two people. With Gail Berry, former legislator from Western Colorado, from Fruita, and Chris Vodapal, somebody who's been working with originally in the governor's energy office, back with Governor Ritter, has been around the Capitol for at least a half a dozen years or more. And both have already proven their worth and value to us as eyes and ears down there just to help us out. I will say that we've got two helping us out in replacement of Danny, and we've been able to contract with them for a total less than what we had budgeted for Danny. So, this is the largest class of first-time legislators. We're not supposed to call them freshmen anymore. So first-time legislators, largest ever. We have a supermajority of Democrats in the House. We have more Democrat members of the House than there are Republicans in either the House or the Senate, and the Senate combined.
What's the ratio? What are the numbers in the House?
40 to
41, 24.
20.
But who's counting, right?
So it's 2 to 1. And the committees, of course, are similarly ratioed.
Mentioned in your memo is the fact that this session are more House Democrats than there are Republicans combined in both chambers.
Chris just said that.
What's that?
Chris just said that.
Sorry, my fault. Reading.
Randy Baumgartner has resigned his Senate seat effective January 21st. The Senate District 8 Vacancy Committee has met and has appointed Representative Bob Rankin to fill the Senate seat, and now soon to be Senator Rankin, will continue on the Joint Budget Committee. And that was a condition for his submitting his name into the Vacancy Committee for consideration. The Vacancy Committee for House District 57 will meet on February 5th and appoint a replacement at that time for Representative Rankin.
So I have a question. So how conditioned, I don't know how that all worked at the rest, because that was what we had heard, that he wasn't going to put his name in because he was not going to be considered for the JBC, and we felt very valuable how he has been in the JBC, and that and I could understand him not wanting to lose his JBC seat by being the new first term senator then. So, but somebody guaranteed that the Republicans evidently said that would be fine?
Yeah. The conversations evolved, because that was my conversation with Representative Rankin, that unless he were guaranteed the JBC seat, and he didn't think that likely, especially if the Republicans, this was before the election, especially if the Republicans ended up in the minority, that he would not have that. But those conversations evolved, and he was assured that, and he has been.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
I think he replaced Dennis Heisey from Springs on JBC.
He replaced a first-term, newly elected, not freshman, Senator Dennis Heisey from Colorado Springs, former El Paso County Commissioner, on the JBC. He bumped him off, essentially. Yeah, and the Representative Ransom is the new House member to the Joint Budget Committee, replacing Representative Rankin. Those people have already begun sitting and serving in that on the JBC in those positions.
Even though their terms don't come up till the 21st.
Yeah, right. One of the things to note, the governor's State of the State address, I think for the first time in quite a long time, focused significantly on water. Governor Polis mentioned both the water plan, John Stoll and Governor Hickenlooper and all those, the roundtables that have contributed to and resulted in the plan. He commended the plan and recognized the role and responsibility in implementation. He also spent a fair bit of time talking about agriculture, the role of water in agriculture, the importance of agriculture in the state's economy. Did introduce new Ag Commissioner appointee Kate Greenberg, and spoke highly of her and the fact that she was the first woman to serve in that position. None of the cabinet appointees have yet been confirmed. Confirmation hearings are just now being calendared starting next week for those appointees. None, however, to date is for Ag Commissioner or Department of Natural Resources or CDPHE. CDPHE, of course, was appointed Jill Ryan from Eagle County, a current commissioner, I guess, until she resigns, until she's appointed, until she's confirmed, and Dan Gibbs, Summit County Commissioner, as Department of Natural Resources Director. So I think those are all very positive additions. That's really it for my updates. Zane, any others, or do you want to dive into legislation?
Dive into legislation. We've got a pretty long list to present to you. So you all saw my email of Sunday with the updated list of bills. I do have one addition that I'll hand out. I have extra copies of the spreadsheet and bill summary document if you need. Got more if anybody needs something. As of last night, we had 196 bills that had been introduced. We have 16 to go through with you today. So needless to say, a busy start to the session. No big surprises yet, but we do expect some, I guess, more difficult and potentially polarizing bills coming down the pipe. So we'll start with House Bill 1006. This bill creates a fuels reduction program, grants program, under the Department of Public Safety Division of Fire Prevention and Control. This is one of the interim wildfire matters review committee bills that we discussed with you this summer, passed out of committee on a 9-to-1 vote. In short, this is mostly focused on the wildland-urban interface. I would expect that most of its efforts will be focused on front-range fuels reductions, but some potential benefits to the western slope as well. Our recommended position for you on House Bill 1006 is to support the legislation.
So where's the money coming from?
Yep.
The money is appropriated out of the general fund. I don't have the total number here. But yes, it would be specifically targeted at coordinating the state's response to wildfires.
So it's not coming out of severance funds? It's
No.
coming out of
General fund
coming out of general fund monies?
That's the proposal, pending joint budget committee budgeting for it.
Okay.
I believe we're gonna see a lot of those proposals, given the great surplus that's hanging out there. It's like dangling catnip in front of a cat.
I would concur with this question, or is that, I mean, we're still fighting the Tabor cap, and I mean, I thought
Yes.
that, I didn't think that these kind of things help the Tabor cap, because you still.
Well, it's dividing the pie that exists. The size of the pie is determined by the Tabor cap. These are all competing for slices.
That are coming out of extra revenue that's being put into the general fund.
Yes.
Okay.
I think of the surplus that's being projected, which
give or take a little, is around $1 billion.
Yes.
About a third of that is estimated to have to be returned to taxpayers.
Maybe a little less from the last numbers I saw. But we will have a taper refund is the projection.
When will they determine just what it does have to?
Well, we have revenue forecasts every 2 months.
Okay.
The March forecast will be what the legislature uses, JBC uses for their final introduced long bill. There will be an April forecast that may modify the final long bill after adoption.
Okay.
You want motions to?
On individual bills, okay.
Support. I
Okay.
move support for House Bill 1.
Albee moves support. Second.
I'll second it.
Second by Acrofresco. Any further discussion on Bill 1006? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Next bill is House Bill 1015, a bill that came to us less than 2 weeks ago from Representative Arndt. This is the recreation of the Colorado Water Institute. Water Institute, housed at Colorado State University, was created in 1981 and automatically repealed or sunsetted in 2017 without anybody's notice. I think we all have worked with Reagan Wascom and the Water Institute at CSU. This bill was supported by the Water Congress at last week's State Affairs Committee meeting, and it's moving quickly. It was amended to eliminate the sunset. The notes in your original email noted through 2029, but they did amend to eliminate the sunset.
Brennan, okay.
Recommended position on this bill is to support.
A motion?
I move we support.
Motion by Munger, second. Second. Second by Trampy. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. 1026.
House Bill 1026 is a outlier, if you will, from the fees bill that the Department of Natural Resources ran 2 years ago originally, and then cut it down into individual chunks. This is the second kind of, they passed a smaller fees bill last session, and this is kind of a cleanup to that. It changes the amount of certain fines imposed for violations of laws enforced by the Division of Parks and Wildlife. An example would be that the fine for not having a fishing license is oftentimes less than a fishing license. So it also adds clarifying language regarding the possession of aquatic nuisance species important to the water community. We recommend that you support this.
At one time in New Hampshire, the fine for, or the penalty for killing a ranger was greater than the fine, was less than the fine for taking deer out of season. So.
Does it increase the fines for using incendiary ammunition?
It does not.
Okay.
Unless you're hunting.
Second. Mr. Catlin, do you,
Well, it's a good bill. Vote yes.
you want to make a motion on this one?
Sure. Move that we support.
Motion by Catlin, second.
I'll second.
A second by Winery. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
Next bill is House 1029, the Republican River Water Conservation District. I bring this to you only because it was an interim Water Resource Review Committee. It expands the boundaries of the Republican River Water Conservation District and includes within the district areas where groundwater pumping depletes the flows of the Republican River. Also increases their board size and changes quarterly board meeting dates. I do not recommend that you take a position on this bill, but wanted you to have it in front of you.
Okay, no action necessary.
House Bill 1050 is the promotion of water-efficient landscaping in common interest communities. You may remember that the River District supported this, the bill that initially outlawed HOA prohibitions against xeriscaping. This bill takes it a step further and prevents a homeowners association from prohibiting the use of xeriscaping in common areas of a covenant-controlled community. Notably, it also requires that certain special districts also permit drought-tolerant landscaping on certain types of land within the district's common control areas. I recommend that you support this in concept. There have been some concerns within the water community that this bill may may not accomplish exactly what it wants to. I would defer any questions to Representative Catlin. And no, I do recommend that we support this in concept and revisit it in a couple of years, or a couple of weeks once the cleanups are made.
Okay. Do you have a motion on that?
So moved.
We have, okay, so, motion by Alcrafresca.
And I'll second it, then I have a question. So who's
Okay,
gonna
second
be-
by Munger.
Who's gonna be the beauty police?
The Special District Association, as well as members of the conservation community, are meeting with Representative Tatone this week to make sure that the intent of the bill is actually what is written within sections 2 and 3 of the bill. There was
So
a
then I
couple of
assume that
double negatives
That
in
could
there.
be like a homeowner in the homeowners association, good question, or somebody else that's neighboring, or somebody, or county commissioners or somebody else.
I better understand your question.
Yeah.
You
The
talked
homeowners
with-
association remains the controlling entity. So if an individual had a complaint or the association has a complaint, according to the association bylaws, they're the beauty patrol.
It does not
They
notably.
remain the beauty patrol.
So would they then be forced to change their bylaws?
Well, they may have to
In
change their
the
bylaws.
HOA?
The only thing this is a double negative. This is a prohibition against prohibitions
I
for
agree.
xeriscaping.
And yet it's a problem out there, so.
Yeah.
And Terry, I don't think they'd have to change their bylaws just become unenforceable if they're prohibiting
Okay,
that
Yeah.
kind of.
I just wanted to know the mechanism.
The
how-
covenant
All
themselves.
it does is, for those of us who've ever had the privilege and burden of being a board member in an HOA, it means that there's gonna be more litigation between HOA members about these kind of things, so.
It does not prevent an HOA from enforcing design review standards.
Hey, Kathy? Yeah. okay.
Zane, is this similar to the language about solar that when that was added to HOA that you couldn't
Chris was around at
prevent,
that time.
It is similar. It goes back to the bill in 2013 that prohibited HOAs from requiring fence to foundation turf grass or prohibiting xeriscaping as part of the covenants, or that those covenants were unenforceable, was the way the bill was written. This provides a similar direction to the common areas essentially owned by the HOA.
Mark? Yeah.
Part of what Representative Tatone is trying to accomplish is there are a lot of special districts on the Front Range. They don't have a government, so to speak. Islands, ranch, some of those. This is her idea of extending the thoughts behind HOA to these special districts, because that was left out in that HOA bill. So this would allow special districts that have developed around the state of Colorado that are in the unincorporated parts of the counties to get into xeriscaping on some of those common owned areas without, breaking the rules.
But it doesn't apply to home rule municipalities though, or?
No, probably not.
So Glenwood can still require that you have bluegrass in the verb there, yeah?
This is particularly aimed at those special districts.
Okay.
In talking to her.
Any other questions on this? Okay. Hearing none, did you have a question? Okay. I call the question. All in favor of support in concept, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. 1071.
Thank you. Bill 1071, among other things, clarifies that the Board of Directors of a Water Conservancy District must comply with the rules of the Water Quality Control Commission concerning the manner in which water courses of the district are used for waste disposal.
What?
This is a newer bill. It also has a requirement that the State Board of Health approve, somewhat unrelated, a municipality's entrance into a joint operating agreement with an industrial enterprise for work relating to sewage facilities. I recommend that we monitor this legislation. I'd really like to hear from some of our conservancy districts here on the West Slope about the Section 2 of the bill before taking a position.
And see if they understand it.
I was gonna say,
Please reread that.
Yes.
I don't understand
Happy
it
to.
at all.
Section,
Ute or something?
Section 2 clarifies that the board of directors of a water conservancy district must comply with the rules of the Water Quality Control Commission concerning the manner in which water courses of the district are used for waste disposal.
And what do they define waste as?
Find, I do not have that in
You
front
know,
of me.
my concern is that they would include stormwater.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Waste
Or they would include agricultural runoff. That would be a major problem.
It's gonna be,
I think we need to oppose.
So they really need to nail down the definition of waste to like, sewage waste,
Effluent,
if
yeah.
that's their intent.
hopefully they're not using waterways for sewage waste. So-
Yeah,
But yes,
That's why I
but,
asked,
yeah,
what
I-
do they consider waste?
yeah.
If it's stormwater or ag runoff, then we would not want to
Right.
support that.
And
We would want to actively oppose it.
And in addition, many water conservancy districts currently have no interaction with runoff to begin with.
Or with
So,
the, or with the
I mean,
ditches.
Are we now
yeah.
all of a sudden obligated to take that responsibility on? This bill is potentially a real ugly one.
It'd be nice to know what the problem is they're trying to solve. There must be a particular instance in which a water conservancy district has approved an industrial discharge of some sort into one of their own ditches or waterways, and that's, so it's gotta be a particular issue here.
I recommend that we monitor, or if we don't want to monitor, we oppose it as it's written right now until we get additional clarification. So
I'd rather see us oppose.
I think there's a whole bunch more here that's lying in there that's not flushed out yet.
There's a lot of sponsors on it, so.
There too.
If I may, I would suggest monitor until we understand it better. I have a meeting tomorrow with Representative McKean, the prime house sponsor, and I will endeavor to understand it better. Hearing the concerns, I think, will also help us
Perhaps a monitor with
skepticism.
grave concern.
Sure, yeah, of course.
And has there been any discussion with the Colorado Wastewater Council to see what their thoughts are on this as well?
No, because I don't think, well, no is the answer.
You
But
You don't think?
we also will, and we haven't heard, we have an email ready to go to our water conservancy districts to see how much concern this gives them.
They're going to have the same question until waste is
Yeah.
defined.
Yeah.
Ms. Whitmore?
And my guess is our water conservancy districts on this side of the mountain will kind of go, what?
Right.
And
that's-
have no idea
I
what the
suspect.
implications are, but the fact that it basically ties, I mean, everybody has to follow the regulations of the Water Quality Control Commission, that's a statement of the obvious. But I don't like it directed at the water conservancy districts in particular. And the Water Quality Control Commission, I mean, if I were representing a conservancy district, I'd have to say to them, this is gonna put you in the position of needing to monitor
All your ditches,
all of the Water Quality Control Commission meetings and agendas in order to see what other additional regulations are being proposed, what kind of mischief. I mean, I think this is onerous.
yeah. Very few of our districts have the capability. I mean, Ute does, Yampa does, Gunnison does.
Monitoring their own cows.
Well, exactly. So I guess I would move that we monitor with grave concern and with the understanding that we may want to oppose unless this is explained much better and has very little ramification.
It's quite a motion there. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Chairman Henry.
And then I have just a comment.
Discussion.
QQ is looking at this bill and feels like it's a language cleanup, so I think monitoring is appropriate until Chris gets to the bottom of it to see if it's substantive like these concerns indicate or a language cleanup.
Peter?
I believe the reference to water conservancy districts is misplaced. I think they're referring to flood conservancy districts.
Flood Conservancy?
Flood control.
flood control.
Oh, okay, flood control.
So,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
there's some, clarification.
But the actual language in the bill, which I'm looking at,
Is
does
water conservancy.
actually say
Yes,
water
yes.
conservancy district. So they may be, oddly enough, using incorrect language in the bill. That's
Right.
my comment.
The limited explanation I've had is that, in fact, Andy, your comment that this is referring to a specific situation, and I want to say it's northern. And that's why, with the bill sponsors, that we're
Well,
seeing.
then let's support it.
That is.
It makes life hard for them. Can we just move the modifier so it says northern water conservancy?
But I will find out more, and hopefully this week, and we will share.
Any further discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Go forth and aggressively monitor
Bill,
with
House,
skepticism.
House Bill 1082 provides statutory clarification stating that water right easement owners can place currently open ditches into pipe or line a ditch without amendment or a new easement. In my analysis, you'll see that Representative Catlin was approached by the Colorado Association of Conservancy Districts with a request to run this bill. I recommend that you support the bill.
Of conservancy or conservation district? Conservation districts.
Yeah.
So that they are the old former soil conservation districts. Mr. Catlin, do you wish to make a motion on
Yeah, I
this?
do. This is something that, in all of my time, I thought we had the ability to do that. And a number of growers in the state of Colorado have been stopped from improving their easements. Because the wealthy that are starting to move into the suburban areas are cobbling these ditches and making them into a water feature, and they're just wonderful. And so the grower comes to them and says, look, we're gonna pipe this ditch. Lawsuit's put in place, they're stopped and joined from doing it. They lose their grant money because it expires, all those kind of things. And my question is, if the state of Colorado is serious about conservation, this is the best place to start. Water right owner has the right, in my opinion, to do whatever he needs to do to make sure that his water right is good.
Minimizing the impact of the landowner, basically.
Right, well, but after they've turned it into an amenity,
Yep.
all of that goes out of their mind. And they also have a problem if you and I walk up our ditch along their amenity.
That's why you usually drive your D9.
Well, I made my living on easements for years. And we never had a struggle with this. Yeah, I didn't get it. We were the water users, but, it's changing rapidly. And in order for ag to have a leg to stand on, this is one of the places I'd like to start.
I take it that's a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that
And
motion.
that's both motion by Catlin and a second by Vanderbrink? He beat you to it.
Okay.
He gets the assist this time.
Move on.
Okay.
So I just have a question, and again, and I totally support the bill, Representative, but I guess my question is we have one of these ditches that go through the town of Hayden, and they want to go put that in pipe two. They thought that they probably had the right to already too. The concern is this lawsuits and the Prietophyte dying off and the cottonwoods dying off, and then the lawsuits and the damages in there. And I hope that, I don't know how you can say, well, there's no damage or no harm done by that, but
But is that grower's responsibility to water your trees?
No, I don't know. I'm just.
No, actually, I
I'm
don't
just
believe
throwing
there's
out
a legal right to waste.
So I'm just throwing out.
I get it, and we'll have that fight when the time comes.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. If we're gonna stand on the side of conservation, that's the quickest, easiest, lowest hanging fruit. And people that are gonna be upset about losing the trees and tamarisks, okay.
Okay, but just so we know that, and
I
you know
understand.
that, and we all know
I would
that.
expect them to come and testify against this bill.
I would imagine so too,
And
because
I'm ready.
and that's great. I support you all the way with it. So I just want to bring up the
I
concerns.
appreciate
gonna
that.
be
That's
right,
like-
right off the bat.
It's
We have a
like you
motion and we
being
have a
against
second.
raising the fines for poaching.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. 1005.
House Joint Resolution 1005 is the annual water projects eligibility list. The River District has always supported this resolution, though no significant effort is necessary to ensure its passage. We recommend you support it. And before a motion, I just clarify that this is the approval list for the revolving loan funds administered by the Water and Power Development Authority.
Is there a motion? A motion by Alvey, second? Second by Winery. Any further discussion?
Just real quickly, so the board is aware, Governor Hickenlooper appointed me as the Colorado Main Stem board member to the Water and Power Development Authority, subject to Senate confirmation.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not on the board yet.
We'll see if we can get some opposition here. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Senate Bill 16.
16, yep.
It's the severance tax operational fund distribution bill that we've discussed with you in the past. This importantly changes the timing and budgeting of severance tax revenues to several grant programs administered by DNR. The bill renames Tier 1 severance tax programs as core departmental programs and Tier 2 programs as natural resource and energy grant programs. Also noteworthy, the bill consolidates 3 transfers made to the natural resource and energy grant programs historically on July 1, January 4, and April 1 of each fiscal year into a single transfer made annually on August 15th of a fiscal year in the year following the severance tax collection. So essentially it avoids us funding our Tier 2 programs on estimates and formulas that more times than not are off. Last year to the tune of 40% off, which brings about a number of problems related to clawbacks, and ultimately this bill is consistent with the recommendations offered by the Water Congress led by Chris within a special fiscal review that again Chris and others led on. I recommend you support the bill.
You have a motion?
Munger, motion.
Well, we'll get a
Second.
okay. Motion by Alvey, second by Munger. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Senate
20,
Bill
yeah.
20, something we discussed with you over the summer, came out of the Interim Wildfire Matters Review Committee as well. Directs the Center of Excellence within the Division of Fire Prevention and Control to study and, if feasible, implement a system to patrol the airspace above wildland fires. In 2018, Colorado experienced 5 different instances in which aerial firefighting efforts were grounded due to drones operating within the area of a fire. This bill passed unanimously out of the interim committee. We recommend that you support it.
You have a motion? Or
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Britt Richard. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Senate Bill 37 appropriates $10 million from the general fund to the Colorado State Forest Service for a forest restoration and wildfire risk mitigation program in fiscal year 2019. The legislation would permit a board of county commissioners to remove wildfire fuel materials from state and federal land within or close to the county's territorial boundary. Chris and I both agree that the district should not engage in the question that this bill raises related to state legislation affecting federal authorities, but we do recommend you support the bill.
We have a motion.
I move to support.
Motion by Chandler Henry, a second.
I'm on a second then, but I have a.
Second by Winery.
I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're talking about,
Yep.
especially like in my particular
Yeah.
case.
Under 3%.
I'd like to clear about,
On the 97%.
yeah, I'd like to clear about 80% of what we got here. You know, I mean, it's well needed, and so $10 million, how, that's where the counties can get some?
Yes, that'll be a pot of money specifically for counties to apply to
efficient for this grant program. Well, if they can get it done, more power to them.
Well, and I mean, I think that mechanism, having been involved in some of this, that good neighbor authority with the federal government brings in, the feds ideally are already contracting through the Colorado State Forestry, and they don't have the funds necessarily to get these logging efforts done. And if the BOCCs are able to bring money to the table to get
Well, we did that in a stewardship
Yeah.
thing, to do that across the Swan
Yeah, so I think this
But
is.
it goes back to exactly what Doug said, or Monger said, you know, the minute that you take that trees out of the equation that somebody's looking at, that view shed, somebody's gonna be cranky about it. We've already experienced a little bit of that. I mean, it needs to be done.
Munger?
So doesn't this also follow Congressman Tipton's direction that he's been trying to do for the last 3 years? He's been trying to have a bill that would allow counties to go onto the federal lands to be doing wildland fire mitigation. So it kind of ties into that. I always told him, well, hell yeah, that sounds good. Send me the money and I'll be out there doing that. But, so.
Yes, and this gives you the permission to go onto federal lands, irrespective of open or closed or private, or I guess restricted, and then send them a bill for reimbursement as opposed to funding it up front.
Mr. Fleming?
I would say not only that, but at least in my quick read of the bill itself, it would authorize one county to go within 5 miles of its neighboring county.
That's true. Yeah.
Do the same.
It's a state good neighbor authority.
Did you say I could build a road to the wilderness area to the other side?
Yeah. But only 5 miles though.
5 miles of road goes a long way.
You need a second?
No, we,
I think we had one.
yeah,
I was heard. Second.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of supporting 037, SB 037, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. More on fire Commission, 40.
Senate Bill 40, yet another bill that came out of the interim wildfire committee. Senate Bill 40 establishes a Colorado Fire Commission intended to enhance public safety through another statewide process focused on preparedness, prevention, and response activities. We, I think, share concerns that this creates potentially just another bureaucracy. For the water community, it's important to note that there are 19 voting members, 5 non-voting members. In those non-voting members are included 2 water utility representatives, one from the west slope, one from the east slope. I recommend we monitor this bill.
Why wouldn't we?
Have a comment?
I'm just wondering why we wouldn't just oppose it. I mean, we just need more, I move we oppose.
Okay, we have a
It's
motion.
just one more bureaucratic, unnecessary commission.
With a pretty big board.
Is there any funding with this?
No.
None mandatory. There may be a fiscal note, which would indicate there's funding required, but not authorized by the legislation.
Exactly.
We have a motion to oppose. Do we have another second on that? Have a second from Hazard. Do we have any discussion on this then? Yes, sir.
I just want to understand, position to oppose is fine, of course, but just, how aggressively would you like us to stomp on this?
In my opinion, I don't think we need to spend a lot of effort opposing. This is not a hell no, this is just a
no,
because we don't need yet one more bureaucratic commission.
And I would note that it's quite duplicative of the efforts that the Forest Health Advisory Council were created to.
And the Emergency Management Council.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just.
Got a lot of
Wonderful points to bring up to them.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to oppose, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, we're opposed to that. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore, on that. We have 70, permanent language updated DNR.
Senate Bill 70, after consulting with Chris and as well as staff at the Department of Natural Resources, would like to change my recommended position to support on this bill. Senate Bill 70 updates existing statutory language that is current and consistent with language used throughout the statutes, authorizing the Department of Natural Resources and most importantly, divisions within the department to receive donations or grants that can be credited to the Colorado Natural Resources Foundation Fund. That authority already exists. And this is specifically important to the Avalanche Information Center, which does not have its own foundation fund and has had to turn down grants in the past year, as has the State Land Board, which suffers from the same lack of a resources fund. So essentially, we've got important divisions within the department that are foregoing the opportunity to go out and write and collect grants to fund the work they're doing. I recommend you support this bill.
Okay, that was your recommendation then.
Oh, I must have changed that. On the original email, I had monitor.
Okay. Motion to support by Alvy. It's a second. Is there a second on that
Second.
motion? By Chandler Henry. Question by Whitmore.
In section 2 of the proposed language, 2433-1081, the only thing I would point out is it has changed the language to read, the Department of Natural Resources is authorized to receive gifts, grants, and donations, et cetera, et cetera. It struck the language or reject. Why?
I spoke with Doug Vilsack, the legislative liaison for the department on that, and it's their belief that that is implied. If you can receive, you can reject, and is consistent with language throughout the statutes.
But you're going to have legislative history that shows that the General Assembly specifically deleted the words or reject, which I think, if there were any question, the implication would be that because the language was already there, by striking it, there is an implication that they intended to delete the authorization to reject. So I would suggest, I'm not suggesting we not support it, but I would suggest that perhaps you point out to the sponsor that it might be a good thing to put or reject back in there.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to offer testimony to that effect as well.
Mr. Treese?
My understanding is that particular language change, that deletion was unilaterally drafted by the Legislative Drafting Office. Simply, it's consistent with you've seen other changes made that are an effort to create consistent statutory language. And so wherever there is that same kind of accept or reject, they've interpreted accept to be a permissive, a discretionary action, and so they have chosen to eliminate the or reject language as a cleanup.
If you have the ability to accept, you have the implicitly ability to reject also.
Then it would be really handy if they put something in the legislative record so that if that's ever
I
litigated,
think legislative record can
people like me can find that legislative history to say.
Okay. Any further discussion on Senate Bill 070?
Well, it does say may accept. It doesn't say shall accept.
That's right. Okay.
He's authorized to, is what it says.
The last two on your list.
Just a minute. We need a
vote.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to
last two, I'll just flag for you. No positions are requested at this time, but two memorials that came out of the Interim Water Resources Review Committee. One memorializing the United States Congress to provide funding for the Arkansas Valley Conduit Project, and the second urging Congress to enact legislation directing the Corps of Engineers in conjunction with the Lower Ark Valley Water Conservancy District to dredge certain portions of the Arkansas River. Again, I don't think that these have anything to do with us, and so I'm not recommending a position, but wanted you to be aware of them.
okay. The legislation.
That's it.
Yes, no, you,
Oh,
you want copies?
Bill and
thank you.
Robert's bill.
A bill that came in last night, pass this around, is a bill that we worked on last year. The River District supported the water quality components of this legislation. Since that time, the bill did not pass in last session, and since that time, the bill's author, Dylan Roberts, Eagle and Routt County, the new chair of the House Rural Affairs and Agriculture Committee, has worked primarily with Chris to include legislation on Good Samaritan efforts at the federal level. But the bill is House Bill 1113 and is the water quality and mining bill. It does outlaw self-bonding of hard rock mining operations in the state, and it changes a number of the water quality components, again, which we supported. Essentially, sorry, let me dive in here. Section 1 of the bill requires most reclamation plans to demonstrate by substantial evidence an end date for any water quality treatment necessary to ensure compliance with applicable water quality standards. Section 2 eliminates the self-bonding option and also requires that all reclamation bonds include financial assurances in an amount sufficient to protect water quality, including costs for any necessary treatment and monitoring costs. The self-bonding applies to any new applications. Existing permits are not affected. I'm going to recommend you support this bill.
Henry?
Question, what about places like the Eagle Mine where there realistically is no end date to treating that water? As long as the Eagle River flows through and the mine is there,
Right.
there's always going to be zinc and arsenic and other heavy metals.
So
If the operators can say, we're done in December 2020, then the Eagle River is adversely impacted.
So this does only affect new permits.
New
Probably renewal, yes, it does.
Well, it may only affect new permits, but those kinds of mines are everywhere.
Right.
I mean, by definition, the water coming out of a mine has heavy metals.
The bill allows for, with a preponderance of evidence, for the commission or the Reclamation Bureau to approve a perpetual treatment. The goal is not to have a perpetual treatment in the belief that perpetual endless treatment is a risk. It is a risk for bankruptcy or other issues, notwithstanding the fact that the bill also requires the bond to be posted to include water quality, water quality considerations. But I mean, that's the point. It's something that we haven't fully understood, have asked repeatedly, but there is the opportunity, though strongly discouraged in the legislation, for continuous treatment for situations like that.
But then presumably your bond would never end either.
Yeah.
Yes, your bond would never end if you have a perpetual treatment, your bond doesn't end. You've got an ongoing reclamation. That's current law.
Mr. Aquafresca?
So we wrestled with this at length at last session, but you're thinking that this has the necessary changes, the improvements that would make it acceptable?
Yes.
And if I can maybe provide some, not so much a legal insight, political insight on this, I think it's going to pass. Our current legislation, legislatures and governor's office are fine with that. I don't think our district gets any benefit from opposing it in this current political. That's my concern, and that's just something to think about, because.
Why? Mr. Munger?
So I guess, and I think in concept, there was some other holes in the bill last year that we were opposed to, specifically, that really tainted our direction on the bill. In concept, this is something that is good governance and the rest, because, you know, we found out the hard way, what happens when Peabody goes broke? And they've got, you know, so really.
And they were solid before they went broke.
Yeah, so, you know, tomorrow is tomorrow and yesterday was yesterday. So I think the concept of this is, I mean, they should be held to the same standards that you and I go down there and doing the same thing too. So I think the bill and concept is a good idea, and I support, and Representative Roberts and I have talked about it shortly a little bit, but, you know, the good, I mean, again, if you imagine Peabody going under, or XL saying, well, no, we're not gonna reclaim this, you know, whatever we had out there. I mean, it happens to the biggest of them. Who's gonna get stuck with it as a society, so.
And this is Hard Rock Mines only?
It is.
Yeah.
I think excuse me if I could, so from my conversations with Dylan, this Hard Rock's mining is the only one that's left out here that isn't covered by the same way. So this is bringing them into the same standard most everybody else is already getting handled.
Notable.
Right?
Yes, yeah, separate statute, but yes.
Mr. Kessler?
There is only one self-bonded hard rock mining operation current, Exxon.
Here in Garfield County.
PG&E may file for bankruptcy too, so.
Right.
I mean, so young. Do we have a motion on this? We have a staff request for a motion for support.
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion for support by Munger.
Okay, sorry.
You are the.
I'll second.
A second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have what, Winery is nay, Catlin is nay, and Altenbrink is nay. Okay,
That's all we have on state affairs.
do you have any recommendations for various appointments to the various boards that we might comment upon?
So I just met the new direct reports and commissions for the first time. They're ramping up. You know, the past couple of months have been focused primarily on the cabinet and some of the senior level staff positions within the different departments. I don't have any immediate recommendations. I don't know if Chris does. We're happy to provide a list to the board of the.
Is there a potential Senate confirmation coming up?
For Chris?
Well, me, yes.
Yes.
Is there
More importantly, I would.
Is there a request for any kind of a comment on this?
Board's discretion.
Do we have any?
Bob Wolf, FYI, Bob Wolf is being reappointed to a second term from the Southwest Basin. He and I are the two appointments made in this.
I think there's no reason our board should not endorse both Mr. Treese and Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Wouldn't hurt.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Whitmore to endorse both Mr. Wolf and Mr. Treese for appointment to the Colorado Water Power Development Authority. We have a second by Mr. Alvey. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. I'd like to vote no, but just a little bit. Yes, sir, Mr. Dr.
One of our struggles in participating in the legislative process comes in the last several weeks of the session as a result of a plethora of late bills being injected into the system. And we don't have the ability to keep up with these late bills or to talk about them or to take positions even when it might be very necessary or important for us to do so. Has there been any discussion about both houses respecting their own rules about bill limits?
Yes, every year. Every year there is discussion, every year there is promises from Republican and Democrat leadership that they are going to be very strict on late bills.
And then in the last few weeks, it all melts down.
It means nothing. Last year we had a record number of bills introduced.
We probably need a limit to the number of late bills that are permitted.
Constitutional amendment.
But I know that's not our mission here.
Okay.
But if you ever have an opportunity to share that frustration please do so.
I will just mention in terms of commissions, the Colorado Water Conservation Board has 2 seats in our district that are up for appointment. Colorado Main Stem position and the Nampa White position.
Okay.
And that, my understanding is Jay Gallagher is not seeking reappointment. It is less clear about Russell George.
I was gonna mention that the other element is, we've just met, the governor has not made any indication of how or what criteria or priorities he has or limitations in sideboards he may have in terms of reappointments or appointments, whatever he may be looking for. We don't know any of those pieces. The Water Power Development Authority, those board positions expire by statute late, somewhere like the 20th of this month. The Water Conservation Board is the March 15th, but both boards continue to serve until replaced, which would which would include confirmation.
Okay. Anything else on state affairs?
So I just have a quick question. So severance tax, we had the one bill in there about the severance tax reallocation and the rest. Do we have any numbers coming out of the governor's office or about what severance taxes are going to be and are going to be? And I guess I continue to be concerned, especially since we threw former Commissioner Gibbs into the DNR position and the rest, and our continued livelihood of severance tax to funding water livelihood in general for the state, and the insecurity of severance tax is about as secure as the coal-fired power plants in my mind. So I guess, has the legislature discussed anything of how we're going to figure out the next funding even of state-mandated water issues? Big question, I'm sorry.
Yes, well, no, it's very important. And
I keep bringing it up, and then nobody wants to talk about it. Well, we'll worry about that when the day comes.
No, we are worried about it, and we have had some efforts. The River District, frankly, led the effort, Zane mentioned, that the Water Congress put together and presented at the Interim Water Committee meeting in August, outlining just those concerns, not only the concerns for the future and the trends, but the annual erratic nature of severance tax, the unpredictability of severance tax, and the difficulties that represents. You have one bill that tries to address that by using general fund as a bridge, so that now we will have 100% reserve account, essentially, so that we won't have a situation where we've made appropriations based on projections. Projections don't mirror reality, and they're either the money that has been distributed is being withdrawn, or the money that has been promised will not be fulfilled. Those are small steps, but the larger step is finding additional or new sources of funding. That hasn't been broached. You do have in both Governor Hickenlooper's budget and in the just released Governor Polis budget, $30 million of general fund money for the water plan, with 20 million of that for water plan implementation, primarily drought contingency planning, 10 million for the water supply reserve account grant funds. So, but we will only benefit from that kind of largesse when the general fund is in good shape, when it has that sudden surplus that everybody's feeding after.
Let's tee this up for the budget discussion in February.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
In all fairness, I want that budget discussion to be about this district. That is a much bigger question about what happens.
How do we
with
solve the state
severance.
budget?
I mean, it's related, but
I don't know that we need to accomplish anything with it today. I keep bringing it up just so everybody's aware.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to shut down carbon things.
Well, because frankly, that
The
factors into
unintended
our
consequences.
assessed valuation too, so it's a component of our budget, whether it's severance tax or just property tax value. Yeah. Yes.
Say, Director Munger, I think it's really critical that we get a hold of Dan Gibbs and whoever else in the new administration, maybe a water advocate, and I don't know who that is yet, and make sure they have that information. I'm not sure. I think Dan will be receptive to it, but I doubt that it's top of mind for him, and I don't know who is in there. There may be somebody who knows those sorts of things, but I don't.
I would note that the state's over-reliance on severance tax funds for our water programs was noted within our memo to Governor Polis. I emailed with Director Stiegelmeyer this morning, and she is in the process of delivering that memo to Dan Gibbs today. So that.
Okay, thank you. State affairs, sir.
Federal affairs?
Federal affairs.
Okay.
Yeah, federal affairs, yeah.
Thank you. You know, I've come to you quarterly and told you not much is happening. I'm going to change my tune this time. In the last quarter, at the end of the last Congress, both in the Congress and the administration, we have some very significant and beneficial, for the most part, pieces of legislation and proposals out there. Yesterday, you discussed the proposed rule, not yet published, to redefine waters of the U.S. Those 5 words have been a contentious issue. The Obama administration used 88 pages to define those 5 words. The Trump administration is proposing to use 263 pages to define those 5 words. And as we discussed, there is still work to be done, especially on the definition of ditches and the clarity for what is clearly not intended to be included as a navigable water of the U.S. Also, at the end of the legislative session last year, the 2018 Farm Bill passed. Also, the Water Resources Development Act passed, both of which have very significant opportunities for the district, for Western Colorado and Western water users. One of the activities of the coming year will be fully understanding what opportunities, what appropriations are there, and getting in early, frankly. I think if we can move in the first year of these new programs, rulemaking is underway for a number of these programs. And so they will be, the agencies are planning on hitting the ground running, and the water users, we will want to be ready for that. I have a memo there with extensively recaps what was and wasn't done in the legislative session, but I would like to spend the time looking at the last 2 pages and the proposed priority issues for the 116th Congress. And again, to remind the board that generally we are, our position, our attitude is there are opportunities in Washington, D.C., but it is a great place to spend an awful lot of time and money without much result. It is also too important to ignore, so watch me carefully and make sure that I haven't been seduced by what I think we're accomplishing. But our priority issues for next year, the recovery program, endangered fish recovery program funding for both the Upper Colorado and the San Juan River, as you heard yesterday, if you heard from Doug, has been compromised. We have had guaranteed annual funding until the Office of Management and Budget in the new administration made a completely reverse determination that wasn't authorized, and therefore right now we're going in for annual appropriations. Senator Gardner has been particularly helpful and does have language has a bill introduced and language to provide for annual automatic spending, essentially, for those 2 programs. That's a priority. However, we have to accomplish it. The drought contingency plan authorization, making sure that goes through, that's enabled and done so in the cleanest fashion possible. all proposals are that this will be a very simple one sentence, two paragraph bill, but I will believe that when I see it. Bolt's Ditch continues to be a tremendous frustration. Bolt's Ditch is a silly administrative question of authority. And so we have to have congressional authorization for the town of Minturn to rehabilitate an old head gate, historical head gate that is literally feet within the wilderness boundary. They've committed they're not going to take any motorized or mechanized equipment in there. Everybody is in agreement that this can and should happen, but it needs congressional legislation. Nobody's opposed to that legislation, but it never gets time on the calendar. The good news is it is already in the S47, the public lands sort of omnibus or minibus bill that has already been introduced and has promises of moving very quickly. Just yesterday, however, I heard that that package that was the consensus package, there are interests in trying to expand that package, at which point, if that happens, at which point we'll have controversy. So it may not move as planned.
That's legislation left over from the 115th, is it? Or?
It was legislation that was prepared, but not the package, the public lands package, so-called public lands package bill was prepared for introduction during the lame duck, but not introduced. It has been introduced already in the 160th. Okay. Mr. Tipton's Water Rights Protection Act legislation, that importantly that he has worked with us to nuance the language that may implicate bypass flows. He is once again interested in introducing that, and he is introducing that today, I believe. We have been working with him, one, to ensure that he's using the same language that was enrolled in the House last year that includes our compromise language, and two, developing some west-wide support for that through last week's meeting at NWRA and some specific outreach to some California Democrats. He had Congressman Polis on his original bill last Congress as the only Democrat. He would like to have better bipartisan support. So we're helping him with that.
So he's been working on this a long time.
We've been 3 Congresses now.
And what is the problem? Is it just doesn't get calendared?
Yes, and there are concerns. In the Senate bill, for instance, so this bill was not passed as a standalone bill in the House, but was included in a drought bill that passed the House with our language. However, in the Senate amended that language upon introduction and removed our compromise language and just, essentially has a flat no to any bypass flows. So that has been a controversy, and it has been, and it's a bill that tells the agencies that they have limited authority. This affirms what they have adopted in guidance, but it does limit their authority. So there is some pushback from some administrations and some Congress people to not get into that, though I would argue that is their role. The other is, I want to let you know that with any wilderness proposals, any wild and scenic proposals, our approach is to work with anybody who has a proposal to ensure that the language included in the legislation explicitly protects existing water rights, both conditional and absolute. To the extent possible, boundaries are drawn to exclude any water features or water rights, conditional and absolute. We have been working for the last 3 years with American Rivers on an effort to have Deep Creek, or a proposal to have Deep Creek on the Garfield County, Eagle County border listed in legislation introduced to list Deep Creek as a wild and scenic river, both wild, scenic, and wild and scenic segments. Again, we have not committed any position. We have just said we would work with them to ensure that water rights owners have been consulted, that there is a consensus if possible, and that water rights language is clear and favorable to river district and water users.
Would that include maintenance of?
Explicitly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, there is a proposal for a CRWCD in-stream flow expansion on that, correct? Also, that includes essentially flooding for vegetation purposes, or?
I don't believe there is there's talk of using, including in the federal language like we had on Dominguez, that disclaims a Federal Reserve water right associated with the designation, with the reservation, and relies on the state's in-stream flow program to appropriate for the values to be protected. Not yet determined how that might be appropriated, how that would be determined.
I thought that study is part of that process also.
The study is out there, yes, but no proposal for an in-stream flow filing or appropriation. There is an in-stream flow on DEP.
There is an in-stream
so
flow,
there's a
but there's
review of the.
There is a
and
desire
we're going to see that
to expand that
in 2 weeks, 3
significantly.
weeks. We're going to see that study. It was done by Wright Water Engineers.
Okay.
The only other couple things I would highlight are the Healthy Forest initiatives. This is gaining traction with all the fires that we've had in the West, and the benefits of the elimination of fire borrowing that we'll see in 2020 in the federal budget. And then the Land and Water Conservation Fund that I've mentioned to you before. We would support full and automatic funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And that language, again by Mr. Gardner, has been included in and has been introduced to have that move forward, and we would support that. Whether that's a true priority of the district, I'm not sure, but it's something that we have an opportunity to support.
Yes, Mr. Professor.
Yeah, the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a priority in Mesa County. There have been repeated efforts to lend support to Senator Gardner in getting this done. So insofar as this board, Mesa County is listing this as a priority.
Eagle County as well.
Colorado has, the last, since the Land and Water Conservation Fund was enabled, Colorado has received on average $1 million a year. That's obviously varied, but not varied that much. We've had a pretty consistent average of $1 million a year, mostly within western Colorado.
Shall we?
Chris, are you gonna say anything, or could you, update us on where, using federal water on hemp stands? There was some action on that, correct?
Yes, that has, well, the hemp has been decriminalized federally. There will be, I understand, so that has largely been addressed. The Bureau of Reclamation will need to promulgate new rules, or guidance actually is all they have right now. I understand from Senator Coram, there will be a state bill to ensure that state law comports with the federal authorizations. There's a small technical change to the language of hemp that will be introduced this year. We'll see that in state legislation.
There was an interesting news item last night in the news that some group, Colorado, was arrested in Oklahoma with a semi of hemp. And local authorities said, well, it had a trace amount of THC, thus it was it was illegal.
Hemp is defined by its THC content.
And they, currently they are charged with drug trafficking that could carry a life sentence right now. So. It was all cleared in Colorado. So we still have a long way to go, I think.
Yes.
Any further questions?
Moral of that story is process your hemp in the state.
That's right.
Any further questions on state affairs? Federal affairs, rather? No? Okay. We want to take let's see, let's go the report of the Information Outreach Committee then.
Okay, and I can be very quick, and we'll move to a break. With thanks to all who attended, thanks President Merritt for appointments and the leadership of Director Stegelmeyer. The staff spent a bit of time patting ourselves on the back for our successes in 2018. We did have record numbers of attendance for a variety of repeat programs, the seminar, the States of the River with New States of the River, a new medium as a webinar that had encouraging 200 plus attendance and 300 roughly registered, which allows us to capture their information and continue communication with those people as well. We will capitalize on the software and the lessons we've learned for those webinars with planned additional webinars in 2019. The committee was helpful in providing support and direction to continue our annual report and to continue the both electronic and printed versions of the annual report. The States of the River, again, I think we heard from the committee that repeating at least the 11 that we had in 2018, that's our best opportunity to be out there and sometimes in the corners of our district to provide a presence and an introduction sometimes to the River District and to continue those relationships. Those will be held from March to earliest June as needed, and we will be leaning on directors when we're in your counties and in your basins, as well as maintaining the partnerships that we have with almost every one of our States of the River with local watershed groups and other interests to both market and conduct those. The committee also provided direction to continue both our public radio underwriting, that's advertising by another name, as well as believing that we are having an impact in getting our name out there, that we expand that, and we will explore commercial radio as well, especially in areas where we're not getting public radio, as well as to the audiences that are different. We will discontinue, maybe phase out, but discontinue our participation in the children's water festivals. There are only a few still that we have in Western Colorado. We will still provide perhaps a financial support to ease our way out of that, but I think we can declare success and pack up the tent because we've gotten those started. They now are largely self-supporting and they are well represented. They have good presentations and programs by local water interests adequate that we don't have to travel to those. Messaging, I think, depending upon what the board provides in direction in February, that the Gallagher and Tabor issues will be part of our message. Drought contingency plan and the implementation of or taking advantage of whatever drought contingency planning is authorized, and generally the what have you done for me lately. We'll try to maintain those as our primary messages throughout the year. Anybody from the committee, any additions or corrections? If not, again, my thanks to the committee.
Seminar, just a heads up.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Scheduling of that may be slightly different, right?
Yeah, the seminar we're having, Two Rivers Convention Center, our annual location, is under a major, or is about to be under a major renovation. It is scheduled essentially for completion right on our annual date. So we wanted to avoid that, and we're having difficulty coming up with another Friday in September because others have similarly changed their dates and have either booked our venues or have or represent conflicts to water users. We may spill into October based on input from the committee yesterday. We will continue that. We will have it next year. We did discuss taking a hiatus of just a single year, but decided that, I believe the consensus of the direction from the committee was to continue that. And so even if it has to be early October or a different day of the week than our traditional Friday. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, before we break, on committee assignments, Mr. Paulo was notified of review. This went to everybody, correct?
I
The committees,
emailed
yeah.
that yesterday.
Yeah, that one, everybody should receive a list of the committee assignments. Just point out, the litigation chair is Mr. Ely. Information and outreach is Ms. Stagelmeyer. The investment committee is Mr. Munger. And the water supply committee is Mr. Albee, as the chairs of each of those. And the executive committee is as the normal rotation. So you all have received a copy of that. And let's take a 10-minute break, and then we come back for finishing up with Wolford and Elkett.
One of the things we have coming up this year is a switch in our concessionaire at Wolford, which hopefully will go smoothly, but one never knows yet, and I turn that conversation over to Andy and Hunter. So I'm gonna let these guys just take it away and run with it.
Thank you, John. I'll call your attention to the, unfortunately, 14-page memo in your packet about Wolford and LCAT ops. But first, I want to touch on something that came up after the memo went out. And so this picture on the TV screens now is the crest of Richard Dam at Wolford Mountain Reservoir. In the distance, a couple hundred feet is where, starting there in a couple hundred feet in the distance, is where we did the crest raise, going out for 1,000 feet beyond that. When we did the crest raise, we drove a lot of trucks on this dam crest. We watered the dam crest for dust control. And then a couple weeks ago, we showed up with this crack in the road base. So just this is a memo that went out to the emergency managers, the state engineer, and others that shows what we did about investigating the crack. Crack's about 1.5 inches deep. The road base is 6 inches thick, or at least that we could measure. And subsequent to doing this measurement with just a ruler, we probed it with a piece of wire, and we took shot back and sucked the crumbs out of it and tried to chase it to see if it was significant and an expression of anything below. The crest having been watered and driven on by over 300 loaded semis, it's pretty hard, and it's been cold in Kremling. It's pretty frozen. So we went at it with picks and shovels, and actually mostly to pick in the shop vac to investigate it. So we dug a couple little pits in it just to see if we needed to do more, get a contractor out there with a machine. And we were able to follow the crack. This is Jack, our assistant operator up there, who's actually a retired state patrol investigator. So he was face down in the hole with the screwdriver in the shop vac, looking for the crack. Frankly, the crack seems to be just in the road base, which you would expect to be compacted and a little more brittle than everything else. And just like if you go out here and look at the street in front of the office, you'll see cracks that are in the pavement, but not in the subgrade below. So we were not able to track this crack even with, paintbrush and vacuum cleaner type tracing into the subgrade below. So we believe that the crack is only an expression in the road base. The state is good with that for now. We may investigate further when digging is easier and backfilling more practical in the spring. But right now our MO is just to look at it every day, which involves a lot of times sweeping the snow off it, and just seeing if there's any changes. So that's been out there in the media. A couple of directors have asked about it. I want to quickly cover where we were at with that and answer any questions you might have.
And if I can just, Ray and John were, and the team up at Wolford were great in dealing with this. Hopped right on this investigation. It was detected on Friday afternoon. The crew was out there on Saturday measuring, and then this excavation occurred on the following Monday. Ray did what was required by our emergency management plan, which is to contact the dam safety officer in charge from Steamboat, and she required that we contact and inform the state and local emergency managers, which included a gentleman in Grand County who was pretty, excited about the potential of what this might be, and it hit the streets in Kremling pretty quickly that there was a crack in the dam. And so we, with the assistance of our Chief Information Officer, Mr. Treese, issued a press release in hopes of getting on top of that day, and that's where the stories came from, both the initial press release and the follow-up memo. which we also released. But it was not our preference to notify the local emergency manager. We did not think it merited that. We did not have a choice. So just so you know, that's the state's position coming from a change of policy from their 2013 floods on the Front Range. They want local emergency managers notified immediately of any type of change. So we just have to know that. Luckily, we have a well-oiled machine here, so we were able to give some information out that hopefully was helpful, but there are probably still people in the checkout lines at the grocery store in Kremling who are concerned about it. So just so you know.
Yes, the states changed their standard as far as notification from a small tree for minor things to a medium-sized tree to a large tree. They did away with the intermediate trees. And so you're just right into emergency managers straight away, not just a dam safety engineer. So that makes for a little more information management challenge. Subsequent to this, we surveyed the dam crest, which we had only surveyed in November for the as-built for the dam rehab problem, and found essentially no difference. Differences in the thousandths of a foot of elevation, which are not beyond our ability to measure. So the dam is not settled since we finished the crest rehab and caused some issues. So that's why we think it's only a surface expression.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have they done moisture test on it too? I may have missed that. I'm sorry if I did, speaking.
No. We didn't do any testing at all other than to dig a hole and see if the crack went anywhere.
Okay.
It's probably frozen down there. I don't know how
It was -4 a couple of days ago in Kremlin.
Yeah.
15.
Well, you saw the
15
two
more
holes.
now, okay.
It took us like 3 hours to dig these two holes, switching off. So,
Yeah.
if we're doing any more digging, we're getting a jackhammer.
That won't add to the crack at all.
No.
So, no, we didn't do any physical testing. We consulted with AECom, our engineer, and they said they probably wouldn't even dig up this if it was summer.
Okay.
So,
I guess that's just something that I've seen when you get something compacted and the moisture starts coming out of it.
desiccated, yeah.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it just expressed at one place. Fortunately, if we had several cracks, then we'd be more excited, I'm sure. Okay.
That freeze thaw doesn't help. I mean, especially that kind of thing's highly susceptible to freeze thaw if it's not that much snow cover on it.
Yes. And it was one of the windiest days ever when we were out there. We had to tie the shovels down. So on to the memo that was in your packet. Being the beginning of the year, we have several contracts that come up for annual renewal to help operate Wolford, some of which are above the general manager's authority, some aren't. This year, a little differently, I listed them all so you can see what's going on up there, whether or not you're required or asked to approve them. We have, looks like 5 agreements that we do need your approval on. And so raindrop water hauling, $35,000. That's routine. Weed management with EcoRx, $42,000. That's also routine, similar to previous year's cost. Purchase of a butterfly valve in the 30-inch outlet. So the 30-inch outlet is auxiliary to the 96-inch outlet that comes off of it. It allows us to do low flow releases and submerged releases in the winter so that we don't build up a bunch of ice all over the place. There's a butterfly valve that we close to direct the water downward and submerged, and that valve has run its useful life. We actually took it out and evaluated it as far as being able to rehab it and decided that was not practical. We put it back in because it needs to be in the closed position for us to discharge submerged, but we need to acquire a new butterfly valve and actuator. And this is the price that we were quoted by the local supplier that represents Missouri. And then, so I don't know, Andy, if you want to take these on.
Well, then marine diving also, you another one.
Well, no, we have
2 more on the marine dive. Maybe if we could get approval on those first 3,
First 3?
because the following 2 will have some more discussion.
Okay, well, let's do these one by one then. For the first one, raindrop water for water hauling for 35,000. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move.
Okay, move to approve by Munger, second by Trampy. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Eco-Rex for 42,000. That's the weed control around the dam mitigation area.
So moved.
Moved by Richard,
Second.
second by Trampy.
Just a question, is that up to 42,000?
Yes, and to be,
All these are up to, yeah.
yeah, and we have run up against that, but we've not had to amend his effort. Here's where we have a lot of drawdown like this, there's some question about whether we get some new surfaces populated with weeds and we might have to mend up. But if we fill, we drown them. So, the answer is no then, so we'll see how that goes, but, this is just a routine treatment.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, purchase of the Desert butterfly valve for 30,757 plus any additional amount that needed for installation of the valve with another contract. So, motion to approve the purchase of the valve.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman, second by Alvey. All in favor, further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, marine diving now, ready?
So, our outlet works has a bunch of mechanical parts that are bigger than we can handle. And, we've had a heck of a time finding a contractor to come in and do $12,000 worth of assistance picking up something like that 30-inch butterfly valve that weighs 1,800 pounds. Marine diving solutions that we've decided is going to be able to help us out with underwater work also can do this pipe work. They're the ones that took the valve in and out for us and evaluated it when we were checking it out. And what I'd like to do is develop a continuing services agreement with them so we can address some of the other outlet works challenges we have, and for them to put this new valve in when it arrives. We did get a quote from another company on some of this work, and even though the guy has a local presence, he was like twice what MDS was for just taking that valve in and out. So MDS is efficient. They know the project, and they're really easy to work with. So I'd like to ask for this 3-year agreement to do this. And I detailed in the explanation a few other things that we're going to have to tackle that MDS will help us with.
Okay.
I know you've told us before, but where is MDS out of?
They're out of Centennial, so they're on the Front Range.
Okay, Alden?
Will this include, part of this 3-year agreement, our annual inspections, dive inspections?
We don't have any annual dive inspection requirements. We don't have FERC.
No.
So
Okay.
FERC requires the SEO does not, yeah.
Okay. And with it, I guess what I was gonna go to is move that, never mind. Okay.
I will make one
This is not for dive work, this is for outside
terrestrial
installation.
work, yeah.
Oh, terrestrial. Oh, I thought this was dive
Yeah,
work.
No, not yet.
No.
We could use it for dive work if we had something we needed to check. So it's open-ended that way. And I've made a mistake here in this, not MDS Inc., it's MDS LLC.
Okay.
So just, I just want to make that clear.
I just say, if you think about it, we have a great staff of engineers and tech, but we don't have mechanics on board. And if you look at other operators, whether it's Denver or Northern, they've got mechanics on staff who are used to and can move, have the tools, equipment to move and deal with this stuff, do it every day. MDS is essentially what we're looking for here is our contract mechanics.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with MDS and the services that they provide, so.
Okay, good.
And I do agree that they are a good expert in this area for working on dams and like this equipment.
We have a motion for approval of a 3-year contract, a continuing services agreement with MDS LLC.
We'll make the
Not to
motion.
Okay, Mr. Catlin? Second. Second by Alden. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Oh,
Okay, so this next one is a little bigger pill to swallow. We have previously ordered 8-foot square new main gate for the outlet works at Wolford, that right now, since we're 20 feet down, sits in 100 feet of water. And So we've had MDS. First off, let me say, we put out a cattle call invitation for people to come and bid on this project. We made the pre-bid meeting mandatory because we didn't want somebody to send something in from California and not know what they were up against. MDS was the only contractor that showed up. And consequently, we worked with them to negotiate the scope and price. You might have noticed the economy's going a little better now, and so trucking and some of the other costs that vary with demand are up, and so MDS's cost is up considerably from what we had previously expected. We've been through this cost with them in great detail over the phone, and believe that we can support your recommendation for this board to go ahead and do that contracting with MDS to install the new gate.
Okay, so this is with MDS, this is also LLC, not Inc.?
Yes.
Okay, with MDS LLC for $444,000, a not to exceed amount.
And this work, if you can picture it, involves the delivery and assembly of a huge barge flotilla that holds a massive crane, a work trailer, you know,
decompression
chamber unit. I mean, it is a huge operation, and the price astounds all of us on the staff. We're not asking lightly for your approval, but we do need to replace this main gate.
Well, anybody who knows this, you have one diver suited up on deck with another diver down there at all times, and they can't leave Kremlin for a few days after they've, what is the time, 2 or 3 days after they've worked?
24 hours.
24 hours?
Yeah.
Because they have to go up in elevation to leave there. Yep.
Yeah, there's a picture of that barge and crane here in our materials.
Actually, that's the one that was used at Steamboat Lake for a smaller gate, so ours is 2 units, 2 8 by 10 by 40 units bigger.
Alden?
I move we approve.
Okay, motion by Vanderbrink, do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Profesca. Is there further discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Good
All
luck,
opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Okay, so
You got
those
your
were
work
the
cut out for you
contract
this summer, Rick.
approvals. Just going over operations, I know we've talked about some before, how the need to lower the reservoir pool at Wolford was advantageous this year for stream flows, and Don and other staff worked closely with the river managers to make the best use of that water. So it worked out pretty well that we were doing that. And right now we're kind of between wanting to hold the reservoir down for MDS's work and managing our inflow and snowmelt possibilities so that we can do our best job of filling. So we're going to be juggling those releases and probably doing higher releases at night and lower releases during the day. Believe it or not, the divers are willing to work in the face of the 8-foot open space with water going through it. Quarter foot per second, so, you know, they're not excited about that, but the manager said if we didn't tell them, they wouldn't notice.
Oh, that's great.
So
you scuba certified in? What's that down there?
So, you know, there'll be some potential risk if this snowpack doesn't build appropriately that we might not totally fill, but I think through previous analysis, we've shown that even if we're down a little bit, we can meet all our contract demands. So that's just a head up on ops going forward.
We do on that really want to be able to fill and spill, not just for the obvious reasons, but also some of the repair work we have scheduled
downstream
in the outlet, which requires that we be spilling and that we're shutting off the entire discharge while we're doing it. So it is pretty critical this year if we can swing it. So Ray and Don will be doing their mathematical dancing on our calculations.
simple request on that then. Please make sure that downstream irrigators are aware of the scheduling that you've got going on.
So this is all gonna happen before irrigation kicks
Is it?
in.
Okay.
These guys are gonna
Okay.
be out there at first ice out,
Okay, so mid-April.
April, yeah, they're hoping earlier.
Okay.
They're actually working at Cheeseman for Denver right now, and they're coming off that job, so they'll probably start bringing stuff in tomorrow, barges and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And there's a contract for your signature.
And we are, by the way, communicating with the press and the public, because we've got these barges being delivered right after we told them we had tracking.
That's great.
Those in town.
Yeah, we'll drive them right through town. And, yeah.
That's your version of Noah's Ark?
Yeah.
So we are communicating, and I think Director Richard makes a very good point, and we will stay on top this year of our communications in advance of what we're doing, because any changes in flow regime, certainly if we have to cycle it up at night, we should, even if they're not actively irrigating, if they're getting ready, I think we need to hear what we're doing.
Right, those come up at night, people are gonna think, oh, that track is just.
There it comes.
Well, the first thing we're gonna do is ramp up slightly before we even start working to melt the ice downstream, because we don't wanna mobilize a bunch of ice in Muddy Creek and cause any damage to anyone downstream. So, we're in tune with that, and we'll be working to work with the people downstream, checking the ice, making sure we're melting it out first, and not pushing it where it doesn't wanna be.
Good, thank you.
So then just recapping the crest rehab, all in all went pretty well. The contractor was a little late. We ended up negotiating some credits for being late. And all in all, the cost of the contract came in at $440,722.57, which was 6% over the original bid number. So out of that, we got some extra work that we needed done, and I think we'll be happy with the work long-term going forward. So, any questions about that? Good. Deformation monitoring, we were interrupted while we were digging up the crest because we didn't have access to the holes to measure them. We're getting that back going again. We've got some new equipment, and we're doing learning how to use it and establishing new baselines. We surveyed the crest of the dam and replaced all the monuments that were affected by the crest raise, and I was really happy to hear it didn't even settle a bit, in 3 months since it had been finished out, so that was good news. Let's see, everything else is just pretty much the details. So jumping over to Elkhead, this year.
You want to talk about the fee structure for concessionaire?
Hunter's going to cover that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole separate discussion. Okay. Elkhead this year, Fish and Wildlife Service took their entire 5,000 acre feet and late in the game opted for the full 2,000 acre feet of lease water at $50. So we got $100,000 of income from the recovery program coming this year. That's good news. The Yampa River, though, was called for the first time ever in the lower river. And I guess there's probably a couple different versions of what caused that and what was necessary. But in order to deliver the fish releases out of Elkhead, it was necessary to make sure that they didn't disappear in head gates, and that ended up in administration of the river. So out of that, we ended up selling 100 acre feet to Coal Wyo because they needed an og plan for their coal mine because they were out of priority. So, and that's dust control and domestic water there, shower houses and stuff for the guys. So we're down at Elkhead, but not enough that we have any concern about filling there. And that's the report on deliveries. Hunter actually ramrodded a couple of repairs that we needed. This Malberg Pond embankment, when we built the dam, we were supposed to use on-site generated rock to armor it. We didn't generate enough rock, and there was a place that we thought maybe we could get by, but apparently not. So we had to come back in and remediate this embankment for this pond that we had to build for an adjacent landowner whose pond we inundated with our enlargement. And then concrete repairs, concrete weathers. So we got a guy in there to do some pretty extensive concrete joint repair, and that worked out real well. The spillway fish.
Can I ask a question about the pond repair? So is that on the west side, or?
Yes, it's
on the west side of the, okay, and that's an area that we created that pond.
There was a pond there adjacent to the reservoir initially.
Right, and then when we raised the reservoir.
We inundated that area.
Okay.
So we built them a new pond higher up.
Okay.
And there's no ditch or anything that goes out of this pond. They throw a pump in it and pump some water up for stock water, but it's basically a stock water pond.
So was the gravel and the rock and the rest, was that for erosion control?
So the crest of the dam eroded back because of wave action, yes. And
okay.
If you can picture it, the dam on their pond has their pond on one side and our reservoir on the other.
Right.
The erosion,
And
the erosion was from our reservoir, from wave action in our reservoir, and that's why we armored that.
Okay, that helps a bunch. I thought this was ours.
And the agreement to acquire the other pond requires us to take care of this embankment, so that's why it's on us to fix it.
That's fine, great, thank you.
Okay, so the giant fish net that we built a couple years ago, it had a 2-year warranty. It had some challenges that we've discussed before. We got the manufacturer to provide a remediation to that, and essentially now it's Parks and Wildlife's fish net from here on out. Not going to do much except pull it off the spillway if it breaks and ends up out there.
So did it work? Has
Well,
it been working?
So the problems that we talked about previously and described here is no. It didn't exactly work right because it's submerged at 600 CFS and it's supposed to be able to pass 2,500. And in the picture you can see below the floats are these little gaps that small fish are getting through. And so by putting another row of floats underneath the apron that's supposed to catch waves, they raised that apron up and plugged those gaps and provided double flotation. So we'll see if it's got enough flotation. Part of the problem too is keeping it clean enough, and Parks and Wildlife has had a net down at Highline Lake by Grand Junction, by Loma, that we built in 1998. And they've been trying to use the same management techniques at Elkhead in a net that's probably 10 times the size, so hand scrubbing, and they need to adjust their cleaning methodology so that it's clean and not plugged when the runoff comes. So they're learning a little bit, but they're dedicating the resources that are necessary and getting after it. So hopefully it won't submerge this year. We'll keep an eye on it along with them, just to make sure it's
That's
working right.
Fish and Wildlife's baby right now.
No, Parks and Wildlife, the
CCW.
state, yes. So the state owns it now. We built it with $500,000 from the CRWCD and another $800,000 from Bureau of Reclamation, but in the end, the state owns the net. So, and there's actually no real precedent for this net being owned in front of the spillway that somebody else owns, but we're having good discussions with them, and the parks people up there are pretty good to work with about that. So, let's see what else we got here. There's just some other small issues that are enumerated. We have no construction work planned in 2019 at Elkhead, knock on wood. I did get some numbers from them on the recreation area. There's 15 campsites currently. One is used as a host site. And they've expanded the campground. I have 31 new sites in my memo, but I think it's actually 37 new electrified sites. 50 amp service, so you can plug in your TV and air conditioner. But they had some pretty remarkable numbers. 2,600 camping nights for 15 campsites works out to 177 days of full occupancy. So, one of the concerns I have, having been involved with this project a long time, is we've had recreational use, but it hasn't been intense, and so it hasn't really created input on how we operate. But we lower that reservoir every year about 9 feet to make the Fish and Wildlife Services fish deliveries in August and September, and so that may become more noticed in more intense use. And I think I left a 1 off the visitor days. It's 123,069 visitor days. Yes.
That's phenomenal. What is the distribution of local versus out of area? Do they have that? Or?
No, it was all I could do to get these numbers, actually. But they do say that they're getting more and more pressure from the Front Range. People are driving further. And, Wolford's full all the time. And so people are just moving further out looking for their recreational opportunity.
Did I see a notice that Parks and Wildlife held a fishing contest up there at Elkhead this summer?
Yes, in order to try to manage the demographics of the fishery both there and at Ridgeway Reservoir, the Parks and Wildlife has been holding tournaments to try and put a lot of angler pressure on the smallmouth bass and the northern pike. And they initially, I think this year was the third one, initially they were giving away stuff like float tubes and a small fishing boat with a motor and a trailer. That was a pretty good gift. Now at Elkhead this year, for the first time, they went to cash prizes for most fish caught, longest fish, and so on. While there's been a few vocal, disgruntled people in the Craig area, for the most part, these events are well attended, and the Parks and Wildlife is going to continue to do them. The idea is eventually we'll have fewer smallmouth bass in the reservoir, and pike, and more largemouth bass and other species that don't do well in the river and therefore don't compete with the endangered fish so much. And ultimately, their goal is to not need a net, but they got a long way to go before that because they have self-sustaining population of smallmouth bass in the creek upstream.
Yeah, I think I saw something in the paper about the contest at Ridgeway Reservoir, and they took out thousands of smallmouth bass in that contest.
Right.
Out of tens of thousands. So, I mean,
probably hundreds of thousands.
It does two things. One, though, it allows them to do population estimates because they do that based on catch per unit efforts. How many hours are you fishing and how many fish do you catch? They are seeing at Ridgeway and Elkhead numerical drops in the number of smallmouth bass that they're getting in their population surveys then. And it's starting to build a good amount of public support for properly managing fish species.
It beats the alternative of sterilizing the lake, which was hugely discussed, especially when the enlargement was coming around, and huge local issue. So
you can actually spell that 2 ways, couldn't you? Disgust.
Yeah, disgust. Yeah.
Let's see. I don't think I had anything else here on Elkhead operations.
Okay.
Or Wolford.
Okay. Thank you, Hunter.
Hunter, you want to come up?
And if I can just give a little prelude to Hunter, I mean, we've got two things. One is a concessionaire change. Our current concessionaire is going to move on, and so we are putting together a request for proposals to see what we can find in terms of a new operator. But the second is a financial change to our fee structure out there, and I know the board in the past has expressed great interest and involvement in our fees, and I would encourage the board to think about it as a policy matter and give us direction on a policy that maybe policy, the policy would be that the fees should remain set at a price that's competitive in the marketplace and reasonable, given our financial desires for cost recovery as well as the local, serving the recreational community at the same time. So a balance is, but I think, I'm not sure the board is served well by getting into the precise dollars that we're setting our fees at. So I would just ask you to think about that as we have this discussion.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Andy. So as Andy mentioned, this memo is a request in preparation for transitioning into the next concessionaire. So our current concessionaire, Jeff Miller with Red Mountain RV Park, he's been there since 2002, and he's ready to retire. We'll be issuing a RFP in the spring to get a new concessionaire to be lined up to take over after Jeff leaves in October. There's two requests. The first request is to purchase some inventory from Jeff. So since he's been there since 2002, he's made a number of improvements. Those included a number of docks, a marina gas station, several buildings, and the reservation website. Our thought in purchasing these things is that we'd like to be able to maintain the current services that we have up there, so people will come back year after year, and they're used to having these docks and gas stations and everything else. And secondly, we want to make sure that the RFP and the business venture associated with it is attractive. And we think that by purchasing this, it'll mean that the next concessionaire won't have to come in and dump a huge chunk of change on purchasing this stuff new. And it'll also mean that we won't be in the same situation in a few more years where we have somebody else's property sitting on our land, and it's not an ideal situation. And then the second request is for the revenue split and the fees. So we're looking to change those. Currently, the revenue split is 80-20. So currently, 80% of the revenues go to the concessionaire, 20 come to the river district. We'd like to change that to 50-50. There are some exceptions for that. For example, with boat rentals, more of the revenues go to the concessionaire. But the primary split is 80-20 currently, and we'd like to change that to 50-50. And then secondly, we're requesting an increase in fees that are outlined in that memo. We've based those increases on a number of things. One, discussions with the current concessionaire. So we've talked with him, and he thinks that these revisions are appropriate and thinks they're very reasonable. Secondly, we've had a number of conversations with our regular users. So some of these people that come back year after year, we've talked with them, and they think that the increases we're talking about are reasonable. We've also looked at some comparable campgrounds in the area at other reservoirs, and they're comparable. It's not quite apples to apples, but they're in a similar ballpark. Another point is our occupancy rate. So currently on the weekends from May through September, we have essentially 100% occupancy at the campground. There's very few empty campsites on the weekdays, and even on average, it's about 70%. So my opinion is that the fees aren't really the limiting factor for getting people in there to the campgrounds. And then one last thing, we've looked at some of the accounting for the current concessionaire, and by increasing the fees and changing the fee structure, or excuse me, the revenue split, it should be about a wash. So it should be similarly profitable for the next concessionaire. So that's one of our concerns, is that we're balancing that we want to pull in more revenues for the river district to recoup some of those costs, but we also don't want to make it an unprofitable business venture and not have any RFPs.
Yeah. And if I can just say, one of the things to keep in mind is that we're not necessarily, it's not a core part of our mission to provide this recreational amenity. It is, however, required by Grand County, our 1041 permit in Grand County. So we are complying with the local government authority in providing this, and it is something we take seriously in terms of our permit compliance. Sorry.
Oh, that's it, unless there's questions.
I guess, a couple of questions. I'm concerned over the annual pass at 100,
yep,
which exceeds the cost of an annual pass for all the state parks. The state park pass is currently 80, I believe, when they just upped it up to 80. and that gets you into all state parks for a year.
Yeah, so when I looked at the numbers, I was looking primarily at Green Mountain Reservoir, those campgrounds, and Steamboat Lake, just because they're in the similar geographic area. One thing to note is it's not really apples to apples, because Wolford Mountain Rec area is pretty heavily developed. There's shelters, there's a fish cleaning station, there's a lot of amenities that these other campgrounds don't have. So what I found was that Steamboat Lake has an annual pass of $80 this year. I think they bumped it up recently, and Green Mountain Reservoir is $90. So maybe they've recently bumped it up. So in my mind, the $100 seems about appropriate.
But the 80 for Steamboat is not 80 for Steamboat. It's 80 for the 44 parks in the state park system.
Right, but we've also talked again, Dave, with the people who hold these annual passes. We've talked with our concessionaire, we've talked with our local operator. All of whom have said, yeah, you know, all that means is we come 10 times, we pay for it. For us, that's really worth it, because we come 30 or 40 times. These are the locals that are here all the time that are buying those annual passes. And I have to say, from the district's perspective, we got to stop hemorrhaging money on our enterprise operations. And so, yeah, we're going to ask the public to pay for it. But I think this is not a major, this isn't going to bankrupt anybody. I don't think it's going to dissuade anybody from coming. Frankly, I think the state of Colorado is choosing to subsidize their state parks pass. I don't think that our district, not being part of our core mission, needs to be doing the exact same thing. And I, you know, it's part of a cost recovery move that our district really has to pay attention to.
I think one comment we got from one of our regular users is that the $10 for a day use pass, if we keep it at $40 for an annual pass, it only takes 4 times for it to, in 10 times maybe seems more reasonable. That was the feedback we got from one of our regular users.
Okay. Mr. Tramp, you had a question for them?
Yeah, I encourage you to go up with the rate to whatever the market will take. You know, if we're providing a service or a concession that people really like, it doesn't matter how we compare to the other state parks as far as I'm concerned. If they continue to keep the sites full, then we should benefit from that.
Ms. Whitmore?
I move that we authorize staff to raise the rates as proposed and make such other further adjustments with the concessionaire or with the rates as they feel strikes a reasonable balance between income, revenue necessary for the enterprise, and market recreationalist needs.
So I have a question on your motion. So I'm a little concerned about the way because that authorizes staff, it's free reign. So we got a proposal. I don't understand why we don't accept the proposal.
It was to accept the proposal, but keep in mind we've got a concessionaire. We still have to go out for an RFP.
And I understand that too.
And so, to the extent what I'm authorizing, what the motion intends, is it authorizes them to issue the RFP to conduct such negotiations as may be necessary, and to the extent that in order to get a good concessionaire, the fees need to be adjusted slightly, but it still reflects an appropriate balance of recreation and revenue stream and covering costs. That would be fine without bringing it back for further board action.
Thank you. I'll second.
We had a second by Mr. Tramp already.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
How much does it cost to buy that fellow's improvements?
$60,000.
And we're asking for a second motion on that.
Yeah, that's
okay. I just wanted to, I couldn't find it. So I didn't know.
Yeah, this is for the fee and session.
And we have, Hunter has been our lead negotiator on that, but he's had plenty of support from the district management in terms of how we arrived at that.
I'm sure.
And are we will we be the first one to charge the decontamination fee?
I don't know that.
Because voters are getting hit this year with a $25 additional ticket tag to support the ANS program, and now we're charging $25 per decontamination.
That's true. That's true, and it takes a significant amount of time to decontaminate. contaminated boat. And so
Yeah.
if a boater chooses not to leave a reservoir and get the seal put on their boat as they're leaving it, that it's been cleaned, and they choose to show up at our reservoir, I think that particular boater who is causing the cost to be incurred should be paying for it. And it is not an entire cost recovery at the fee that we're charging.
But point of order, that's not part of this motion.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
Yeah, this is part of the
I
fee
thought it was
structure.
part of the-
Oh, this is
Okay,
it's
sorry.
the 2 pages of
You're
the fee
right.
structure. Yeah,
Sorry.
it is, yeah.
I see the decontamination.
But Andy's right. If they don't take the time, they leave way after hours and they show up there, you're not recovering back your cost to get your thing there. So it's if they want to go get it done somewhere else and have their
Just have good
sticker
stuff.
put on it, that's
Yeah, and if they want to go someplace that doesn't charge, that's great. And it's these are expenses that our district is bearing that frankly, again, is not really in our primary mission.
And at Elkhead, the state runs the program, and so they have benefit of that fee, which helps funds their presence.
Yeah.
Even though we bought them the hot seat to wash the boats with, they don't charge a fee to do it there because it's covered by this other sticker and fee structure.
They don't share that sticker revenue with us to do our inspections.
Okay.
That's a great point.
The other thing is this fee structure goes into place next November.
Correct.
So it
This will
wouldn't
not
go.
affect our current contract with Red Mountain RV.
Oh, okay, I thought Red Mountain was over this operating year.
Yeah, they have one more.
Okay, they do it one more year, okay.
But they're going to be doing the RFP.
Yeah, they'll be doing the RFP this spring to get somebody out there next year, okay.
We do appreciate the flexibility, because I honestly, this negotiation with a new concessionaire,
It's gonna take a while.
we got some fears that the board should hear. This is a niche market. There are some national companies that do it. We don't know if we're going to appeal to them. There are potentially some local interests, but they may not be interested. Worst case scenario, you may have us coming back to you during this year telling you that we got absolutely no interest at any price structure or fee split, and so we're going to be coming to you saying we're now going to operate this rec area ourselves in order to make sure that we continue to comply. We don't want to do that. You can tell from my position, I have no desire to be the camp host, but if we are going to do everything we can to get somebody out there as a concessionaire, but just be aware, it's a weird market, and that's why Hunter is way out ahead of this happening, and why we're doing it.
Okay. There are other discussions on this one? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. I don't know if folks saw a couple days ago, the 20 of the 44 state parks are going on a reservation-only basis. You see that in the paper? They have such a demand that 20 out of the 44 are reservation-only for campsites.
it's because they're $80.
So the other thing we do need a motion on is to authorize staff to enter into the purchase of the equipment for $60,000, Red Mountain RV Cart LLC.
Up to 60,000.
One quick note on that is, we'll be writing up some sort of agreement that makes sure that we'll be inspecting it at the end of his tenure, so that it's.
So the contract for purchase would be executed upon his exit, or purchase when he
No,
leaves?
the contract for purchase will be executed.
But the purchase would be
Now, the actual
executed.
purchase will not occur until he's leaving, and we
Yeah.
would have the opportunity to inspect.
Okay.
So is the operator then gonna own anything after that, other than mobile equipment or whatever he needs to do his job?
Whatever the new operator needs, if they want to bring in additional things, they certainly could. But we have some control over what they add to the property. We would really want to maintain primary ownership of any improvements. And that's the.
No, I think that's a great method, a great way to do that. I just want to make sure that, yeah, good, thank you.
Anybody who's entered into standard commercial leases, I would say, going forward, we will treat any tenant improvements as tenant fixtures, which would be the landowners. A, we get to prove, and B, the presumption is that we own them the minute they put them on there. but if we choose not to want to own them at the end of their lease, they have to take them out at their expense. So it's a little bit of a change in how our lease is.
Sounds good. Okay. We have a motion for purchase. Motion by Hazard.
Second.
Second by Whitmore. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, Hunter. Thank you. Okay, Andy, you want to discuss future meetings?
I do. I think our first future meeting is, well, we have starting the joint meeting starting February 7th. We've just talked about those at noon bi-weekly. We will, however, have a meeting here on February 15th, starting at 9:30 in the morning to discuss our budget workshop and our status on our phase 3. I would, by the way, just to briefly touch on, we have the Water Congress coming up here at the end of the month. I have positive RSVPs from 6 of our directors. We are in the process of trying to set up a dinner that Thursday night with the Denver Water Board for ours. Now, it may not work out. Jim Lockhead is very interested, but he's checking with his board to see what kind of numbers we can get. I thought it was a great opportunity. We've got 6 board members over there already.
I'm gonna go as well.
Excellent, excellent. And I was gonna say, if anybody else wants to go, please, because I do think it's a really useful event for any director. And I do think that this, if we can get the engagement with the Denver Water Board, it's important and it's really a valuable. We did that during the Colorado River Cooperative Agreement multiple times, and it helps. It will help. I mean, we will always have ongoing issues with Denver, and having some personal relationships developed at the board level is important. So we're trying to do that. I would say that, by the way, if we don't actually get Denver, I would still plan on having a board dinner that night. So Thursday of Water Congress, if you can keep that available. You know, obviously our quarterly meetings coming up. I don't think there's anything else that necessarily we have to focus. We do on our annual seminar, moving that around. I want to suggest that if we have to move it to a different day of the week, so if it's a Thursday instead of a Friday, I still want to try to have our budget workshop right around that. So we may really flip those days where our budget workshop occurs just after the seminar, and we'll do our best to make it work. But it's you know, the EA team has been working very hard to figure out these accommodations. It's really a tough, challenging thing in conjunction. We do want to keep it in the INO committee was very clear. They want to keep it in junction for a lot of reasons. So we're gonna figure it out. But that is a floating date, unfortunately. It will most likely not occur at the same time that we have had it in the past. So I think that's really it. I do appreciate the directors who came to CRWA, and just encourage. I guess the one other one that Pope Grant has got coming up, I want to say May 2nd is the date I saw for the 4-Basin West Slope Roundtable.
What's the date?
Is that
May 2nd?
Jim? Is that May 2nd now?
Yeah, May 2nd. May 2nd. 4-Basin West Slope Roundtable at U Water. Would encourage our directors to try to attend that. There is also an all-basin, I think some people would call it a compact convention of some sort or something, but a convention, a basin convention held in the Front Range Westminster.
It's actually going to be in Winter Park.
Winter Park. Okay.
Winter Park now?
What?
Wow. Wow.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's September 24th, 25th.
So that also posed a logistical problem for us having our seminar anytime that same week. So
Like the 26th.
like the 26th. So
Well, if it's in Winter Park, from Junction or from Glenwood Springs, you can ride the train up.
perfect.
Because it stops at Winter Park.
Excellent idea.
Got
We'll
the
rent
board
the club
meeting on the
car.
train.
There you go.
If it gets there
Okay. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody here. Thank you for coming. And Dave, do you have anything else?
I don't have anything else, nope.